Advisory Committee meeting. Anne-Marie, can I do a sound check with you? Okay, yeah, I was advised my staff already did for you.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Then I did send you a message. Hope you did receive it.
Hi, can I get everybody's attention, please? We have quorum, so we're going to start the meeting right now. Thank you.
Great. Good morning and welcome, everyone. We have quorum now. We have a number of members joining us virtually, so we'll make sure that they're all We can see that they're all there. That's great. Okay. My name is Elizabeth McIsaac. I'm the chair of the Housing Rights Advisory Committee. The clerk has confirmed that we have quorum, so I'd like to call meeting 2 of the Housing Rights Advisory Committee to order. Welcome, everyone. This meeting is being held with committee members and staff participating both by video conference and in person at City Hall in committee room number 2. Members of the public may also attend in person or observe the meeting on YouTube. I ask everyone for their patience today with any delays or technical issues. We have a full meeting, so we are going to do our best to get through all of it. A few reminders to staff: please keep your video turned off unless you are speaking or answering questions. Members and staff, please keep your microphones muted unless you need to answer a question or speak. And members, if you wish to speak, raise your hand and unmute your mic, and I will acknowledge and identify. If you are joining us online, I will look for you online to see your hand go up or some gesture. And be patient with me if I don't find you right away. And so with that, I also remind members that if you have any motions on any of the agenda items, they must be submitted in writing and can be emailed to the committee secretary at hrac@toronto.ca. Although we are meeting today in different locations and remotely, the committee would like to acknowledge that the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat, and the Chippewa. It is also now home to many diverse First Nation, Inuit, and Métis peoples who have come here to make home. And this is the subject of our committee, is about finding home, keeping home, and having a home that is adequate, safe, and secure. And so part of a land acknowledgement is the recognition of truth. And we understand that many Indigenous peoples have, in fact, on this land been displaced, colonized, and it is the work of this committee to begin to change that course. So before we review the agenda, there is one new business item that I'm responsible for, so apologies to the clerk for entering it on Friday afternoon. It is a letter from me, the chair of this committee, on honorarium paid to Housing Rights Advisory Committee public members for working group participation. I believe the clerk has provided you with copies. Can we put that on the screen? I will explain this as we get to it later on the agenda, but for the moment, can I please see a show of hands for all in favor of adding the item to the agenda as new business? And I'm looking on. First vote. It's very exciting. I want to see online, though. I didn't see hands online go up. Did we have a vote from the participants online? Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Anne-Marie. Great. Wonderful, thank you. So anyone opposed? Carried, successful. So that will now be moved to item HS 2.5. I will hold this item down so that the clerk can make the item public online and we can consider that later in the meeting. Thank you. So let's proceed with the agenda. We now have 5 items on the agenda. Let's consider them in the order as they are listed. First, we have a presentation from Luke Brown and Kwame Addo from the Ombudsman Toronto office. Luke is the acting Deputy Ombuds Housing, and Kwame Addo is the deputy, not the deputy, he is the Ombudsman, Toronto Ombudsman. So welcome to both of you, and over to you.
Okay. Thank you very much, through the chair. So good morning. As the chair mentioned, my name is Kwame Addo. I'm the Ombudsman for the city. Joining me this morning is my colleague Luke Brown, the Acting Deputy Ombudsman. I want to thank you very much for inviting us to speak with you this morning to talk about the housing unit. So in July 2022, City Council passed a motion by an overwhelming majority requesting our office to provide recommendations concerning the resources and structure needed to focus on investigations related to systemic housing discrimination and hurdles in the city's housing planning and service delivery roles. And this included considering the establishment of a Deputy Ombudsman housing. Our plan received approval at the March 2023 Council meeting, And with the hiring of the Deputy Ombudsman, Rima Patel, last July, the housing unit within our office was established. I'll now hand it over to Luke, who will deliver our presentation this morning and speak to you more about our role and function, how we do our work, and what we've been up to since the unit was established. Luke?
Thank you, Kwame. Thank you for having us here today. I'm excited to present our team and our work to you. So I will just do a brief overview of the presentation today. So we'll start with an overview of our office, just to give you a bit of sense of what we do in general at Ombudsman Toronto. I'll talk about the history of the housing unit, which is the specific team that's been created that I'm here to talk about today. We'll talk a little bit about the right to adequate housing and what that means for us. I'll go over the mandate of our housing team. And then I'll talk a little bit about the work that we've been doing to date and the work that we have planned for the future. So first off, overview of our office. So Ombudsman Toronto is one of 4 accountability offices at the City of Toronto. And what we do is we make sure that the city is accountable for treating everybody fairly and equitably in the City of Toronto. So we're a statutory office. That means that the city is required under the City of Toronto Act to have an ombudsman. And what we do is we work independently, impartially, accessibly, and confidentially to ensure the local government serves people fairly. And we do that by investigating complaints. So basically anybody in the City of Toronto can complain to us about a city service that they've received or a program that they're trying to access. It can be anything from TTC to TCHC to parks to MLS. Really anything that the City of Toronto administers, we can look at the fairness of that. Now we typically will only look into a complaint after an individual has already kind of gone through the existing complaint mechanisms. So we call ourselves an office of last resort, which means that usually we expect folks to try, to give the city a chance to try to work out the problem that they're dealing with before they come to us. If they come to us, they haven't been able to get a satisfactory answer, then we can look into that. We can investigate and we can try to help them get a solution. So we can also look into concerns without a complaint. So we have what we call own motion power, which means that if we spot an issue in the media or in conversation with somebody or through a forum like this committee here, we have the ability to then launch an investigation of our own motion. An example would be we looked at the city's process for clearing encampments. That was a result of a lot of media attention and other concerns that we heard about that process. So we were able to then launch an investigation to look at that issue. Now we also help people navigate the local government. So if they're having trouble trying to figure out who to go to apply for something, or they're trying to complain and they don't know where to go, they can come to us and we can try to point them in the right direction. So that's kind of our office in general. We look at everything at the city. But I'm here to talk more specifically about our housing unit. So it all dates back to, which I'm sure you're familiar with this, but the Housing TO Action Plan 2020 to 2030, adopted in December 2019, talked about the establishment of a housing commissioner. The city ended up engaging Crean Consulting and Maytree, who came up with a report that presented a number of possible solutions to come up with an accountability mechanism to hold the city to account for its housing objectives. And so what the city ended up doing is moving forward and asking us, the Ombudsman, to take on a key role in holding the city to account for its commitments under the Housing Action Plan. So the city asked us what we thought. We came back with a proposal about how this could look, what kind of role we could play, and that was approved. And so in August 2023, we hired our first deputy ombudsman specifically for housing, and that's Rima Patel. So she's currently on parental leave, and so she'll be back next year. And so until then, I'm filling in for her. And so what we're looking at, or what we're most interested in, is the right to housing, the right to adequate housing. And I've got a quote here from the United Nations talking about how housing is the basis of stability and security for an individual and family. We know that the right to housing has been recognized now in federal law through Canada's National Housing Strategy Act. So it's a fundamental right. It's found in international law that's been adopted in Canada. We know it's essential to the inherent dignity and well-being of the person and to building sustainable and inclusive communities. And we know that the City of Toronto has a role to play there. All orders of government have a role to play in furthering the progressive realization of the right to housing. And this includes municipalities. And in fact, local governments are often at the forefront of the struggle for housing. So, in recognition of that, the City of Toronto has adopted its housing charter, which again, I won't go through in great detail, but suffice it to say that the city's recognized the importance of the right to housing, adopted the City of Toronto Housing Charter that takes a human rights-based approach to housing and recognizes that all residents have the right to, and there's 7 key principles there, which I won't go through point by point, but that's been set out and adopted by the city. So what is our mandate at Ombudsman Toronto at our housing unit? Well, what we're doing is investigations and systems reviews. We're advocating for a right to housing. We're engaging in relationship building, engagement, and city staff consultations. And I'll go through each of those in a little bit more detail. So investigations and reviews. So I already mentioned that we do systemic investigations. So this team will be doing specifically systemic investigations and systems reviews related to the city's planning and delivery of housing and homelessness services. Now, systemic investigations basically will look at and recommend fixes to any practice or a policy or procedure that might be having an adverse effect on particular segments of the population when it comes to housing. Now, we typically produce reports. We'll do an investigation. We'll come up with a report, which we will report out publicly. It goes to City Council, and we'll have recommendations in there. And then we'll structure our recommendations so that the division that we're investigating agrees to them and says they're doable, and then we hold them to account by following up on the implementation of those recommendations. Now, we can also do systems reviews, which is sort of like an audit program looking at the degree to which housing policies and programs are meeting their intended outcomes. Next, advocate for the right to housing. Now, this is really at a systems level, and we're looking at fairness and the progressive realization of the right to housing. We're not going to be advocates on behalf of a particular person or a particular group. We're looking more generally through our recommendations and through the work that we do behind the scenes. We'll be pushing the city to realize what it's committed to doing through the Housing Charter and its action plan. Now, relationship building. So we're committed to developing and sustaining relationships with the broader housing community. And so that's through meaningful and ongoing dialogue, learning and information sharing. Engagement, so we're doing quite a lot of engagement right now where we're engaging, we're consulting with people with lived experience of housing precarity. We're also consulting with external housing bodies, other levels of government to learn and identify systemic issues, as well as to share information. And finally, consultations. And so this is a role that we've already done through our general work, but now we're doing specifically with respect to housing matters. We can act as a sounding board to city staff. Anybody from the city can come to us and say, we're working on developing this new policy or a program. It has a housing angle to it, and they would like for our feedback to talk about the right to housing and whether they can strengthen what they're developing through our feedback. So what have we been doing? Well, the housing unit is now fully staffed. So I mentioned REMA started last summer. We've got all of our staff in place now. So we've got an administrative assistant, we've got 3 investigators, and we've got a policy development officer. So a small team of 6, but a mighty team. And we launched our first investigation into the city's decision to deny asylum seekers access to the base shelter system last summer. We're also monitoring and following up on the city's progress in implementing recommendations that we made from 2 other investigations. So I already mentioned the encampment investigation, as well as an investigation into Toronto community housing, where we looked at their human rights complaints process. So our team is now following up with the relevant divisions and with TCHC to oversee or make sure that they're implementing those recommendations to our satisfaction. We've also been consulting with city staff to discuss housing-related issues. We have a regular reporting relationship or meeting relationship with the Housing Secretariat to talk about the projects that they have on the go. We're building a human rights framework for our systemic investigations, which will complement our administrative fairness reviews. The work that we've generally done to date has been focused on administrative fairness. We're now taking a human rights specific angle with this unit. And building out an engagement plan, but building it as we go, because we're already doing quite a bit of engagement. See the bullet point at the bottom there says we've already met with over 50 internal and external stakeholders so far. So that work continues, ensuring that we're meeting with members of community groups, people with lived experience of housing precarity and discrimination. We're meeting with advocates, members of city council, senior staff, to introduce our work as well as to hear about the issues that they're dealing with. So we'll continue our investigation. This is the work ahead. We will finalize our refugee investigation. We'll continue our monitoring of those recommendations I already mentioned. We hope to launch a new systemic investigation or systems review this year. Continue our consultation role, and we want to publicize our human rights framework, which we think will be a very helpful tool for other municipalities in the country, as well as for staff here at the city and for the broader housing justice movement. I think it'll be a very interesting tool that other folks can get some use out of. And then obviously staying connected to the community through our comprehensive engagement plan. So that is the end of my presentation, and I am happy to take any questions that folks might have. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Luke, and thank you, Kwame. Before we take questions from the committee, I believe we will hear from two speakers from the public who have joined us. I ask the clerk to confirm that our first speaker, Chad Hammett, is ready to proceed?
Yes, he's right.
He's here in person. Wonderful. So if we could create space for Chad to come to the microphone. So welcome, Chad. You have 5 minutes, and when you're getting close to the end of your time, I will give you a bit of a notice.
All right. Good morning, hold on a second here. Good morning to everybody. I'm here today to request your urgent attention and intervention in overseeing the implementation of the City of Toronto and Toronto Community Housing's policy, with a particular focus on ensuring that the rights of individuals with disabilities are upheld from a human rights perspective. Individuals with disabilities often incur significant barriers, like myself, when seeking housing, including lack of accessibility, discrimination, and inadequate accommodations. The challenges not only impede our ability to find stable housing, but it also violates our fundamental human rights to live independently. It is a collective responsibility to address these issues and work towards creating a housing environment that is inclusive, accessible, and respectful for all the human rights of those with disabilities. The Ombudsman has a critical role. Your role is critical to ensuring that the City of Toronto and Toronto Community Housing's policy is implemented in a manner that upholds the human rights of individuals with disabilities. Your office has the power to investigate, monitor compliance with relevant laws, regulations, and recommend necessary policy changes, and advocate on behalf of marginalized individuals who may face discrimination or exclusion, like myself. From a human rights perspective, access to adequate housing is a fundamental right. The City of Toronto and Toronto Community Housing's policy must be designed to promote accessibility and non-discrimination, ensuring individuals with disabilities the equal opportunity to secure housing that meets their specified needs and enable them to live with dignity and independence. The City of Toronto and Toronto Community Housing do not follow these policies of the human rights policies. There needs to be guidelines set so the City of Toronto and Toronto Community Housing know that they have a duty to find the most adequate housing for people with disabilities. I believe the City of Toronto and Toronto Community Housing need to be trained by medical team that can evaluate and look at someone's disabilities on a medical critical priority transfer and find the most adequate housing. This is a problem with the City of Toronto and Toronto Community Housing. You, the Ombudsman, need to force the City of Toronto and TCHC to adopt policy change in the way that they deal with people with disabilities on a medical critical priority transfer. The Ombudsman needs to ask the City of Toronto and Toronto Community Housing to adopt policy to have a medical doctor or a medical professional examiner examine these medical critical priority transfer to determine the best unit to offer someone with their disabilities. This cannot be somebody with no experience in the medical field making critical decisions on who have no idea on how to accommodate certain people with their disabilities like myself, who have serious problems with migraine, headaches, breathing problems due to smoke and scent. This is a very serious problem that needs to be addressed immediately, and policy needs to be implemented and put into place to protect people with disabilities and trying to find adequate housing that suits their disabilities. How can anybody with no medical background say to anybody with disabilities that this unit is adequate for their disabilities if they're not trained in the medical field? The City of Toronto and Toronto Community Housing have a duty under the human rights of Ontario to accommodate undue hardship and to properly house people with disabilities. I've been offered a unit that have 4 steps. How would anyone like me with a wheelchair or scooter even be able to access that unit? This policy needs to be changed. I believe the City of Toronto and Toronto Community Housing do not take people's disabilities serious to find the most adequate accommodations for that person. No matter how many units they offer that person, you need to keep going until they find the right one that's suitable for that person's disability. You can't just pick any unit. There's no one who is medically trained that can look at someone's medical critical priority transfer. In light of the above, I respectfully urge you to take immediate action to oversee the implementation of the City of Toronto and Toronto Community Housing policy with focus on ensuring the rights of individuals with disabilities and respect and protect by advocating for inclusive housing practices, monitoring compliance with the human rights standards, addressing discrimination and barriers to disabilities. That's what I have to say.
Thank you, Chad. Thank you. That was very, very well explained and really helpful, I think, not only to the Ombuds, but for our committee.
I'm having a problem right now being housed as I'm on a critical priority transfer. Mr. Perkins has seen me here a few times going around trying to figure it out, but Toronto Community Housing and the City of Toronto they don't know where to put me. They keep telling me this, and it's just a real big barrier for me, and nobody's being held accountable for being offered units. Like, how do you offer somebody like 4 steps going into a unit? And they've closed my file because they said that I'm not accepting these units, but they're not medically qualified to tell me to say, hey, you know what, that's medically not good for you. So yeah, that's what I have, and I'm hoping that we can have some change and some policy directed in that way.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, guys.
We have one more speaker, and then we'll open it up to the committee for questions to the Ombuds, Deputy Ombuds and the Ombuds. Next is Miguel Avila Velarde, and he is here.
Hello.
So, let me just reset this. And over to you. Is that, yep.
Good. So my name is Miguel Avila, and I live in TCAC since the year 2010. I have mental health and physical disabilities. I ended up in TCAC after losing my job at the Toronto Zoo unjustly in 2009. I lost my home in a co-op, I lost my car, my children, my family, and I ended up on the streets with my dog Fido, homeless. So when I heard about the Ombudsman office, Fiona Kring, in 2010, I approached her office and said, so are you willing to do some reviews of policies and employment in regards, to my employment problem at the Toronto Zoo? She said, no, Miguel, that's not possible. That is labor issues that you had to deal with your union. So I ended up in the streets, as I said, with my dog Fido. And thanks to Street to Homes with Fred Victor Center, they found me a home in TCAC. So we're talking about housing today. And I'm going to be speaking specifically on slide 18 of the presentation on the Ombudsman about the work ahead. So, there's a lot of work ahead, and I'm just happy that my brother Ahmed explained to you a little bit of the tip of the iceberg that is going on with TCAC. In June 2023, the Ombudsman released a report saying that TCAC human rights complaint process is outdated, rightfully so. So, Jack Sharma, who works now in the city, says, hey, don't worry, dude. I accept the 14 recommendations. I take ownership of that problem. Now, what happened? He worked for the city. Tom Hunter, CEO of the senior portfolio, takes over and says, nothing. If I'm going to do what the recommendations by the Ombudsman. So here's the dilemma. Nobody's taking full responsibility. They say they have a human complaints process. However, they didn't tell you how long is it going to take. I'll give you a good example. And I hope this overhead is working today. My friends in the cabin, wake up, wake up. Okay, there you are. So this is an e-truck. I use it because I have physical disabilities. It's 3 wheels, and it keeps me balanced, and I'm able to run and save TTC money because I don't have the luxury for that, to come to City Hall. Today I had to take TTC. So since March 15, 2024, the FOB access to the underground garage was canceled. So guess what? I go to the TCAC hub office and says, listen guys, I need to have access. And all of a sudden, they come up with this wonderful strategy. They turn all the e-bike lockers on the underground garage, and they label as e-bike lockers only. Without a policy, my friends. Where is your e-bike policy? Show me. Show me your bike policy. No answer at all. Guess what they did? Oh, we're going to reward Miguel with an eviction. Check it out. So they gave me an M5 and an N6. Now they want me out on the streets. How is that possible that people who is indigenous, who has been previously homeless, all because he wants to speak on behalf of his residents, they signed a petition, by the way, 35 residents for a noise complaint violation. I am being retaliated with eviction. I have a 5M5, I have a 5N6, and I'm waiting for the LTV to address this problem. But at the same time, the problem is that using retaliatory tactics like the one on my bike, my truck, that is enable me as a person with physical disabilities and mental health disabilities to use this truck since March 15. They promised to deal with it. I filed the human rights complaint process, and no answer until today, May the 12th, 2024. It's shameful, and I hope someone in TCAC wake up, because this is not the answer, to throw Miguel under the bus like they did to me at the Toronto Zoo in 2009. I'm not prepared for that. I'm 59 years old, and I work for my community hard for Regent Park. Thank you.
Thank you, Miguel.
Any comments? I'm here 24 hours, guys. Since 2010, 14 years of work.
Thank you very much.
Nobody can beat that.
I would now like to invite Luke and Kwame back to the microphones. And I'd like to open it to the committee now. If you have any questions for our speakers and their presentation, I'm now looking to the committee. I would like to be able to see the people online in case anybody online wants to raise a question. But first, to those of us in the room, are there any questions for the Ombuds? Yes, Bahar.
Thank you for your presentations. I wanted to speak to the consultation role that you're having as part of the housing work that you will be doing. You mentioned that you'll be a sounding board for city staff in terms of developing their policies and plans. Are there any ideas or plans in the works to train folks in a more proactive way as opposed to them coming to you?
So through the chair, that's a good question. Our role is specifically not to do staff training. So we will not be doing any kind of formal training program for city staff. I believe that the Housing Secretariat could speak to plans on staff training when it comes to the right to housing. But we do want to help on, I guess, a case-by-case basis when we're doing these consultations, help staff understand their obligations under the Housing Charter and what it means to fulfill the progressive realization of the right to housing. So it won't be in kind of a formal large-scale training program, but we do see opportunities on a case-by-case basis when we're doing these consultations to help specific divisions start to kind of operationalize the right to housing in the policies and programs that they're developing.
Yes, Lindsay.
Hi, I just wanted to know where I could get the reports on, well, both of them that you mentioned.
Certainly, yeah. All of our investigation reports are available online on our website. We have a section you can go to on the website that lists the different reports we did. And I should specify there are 2 encampment reports. There is an interim and then a final report. So if you're looking for them, make sure you check out both. And then there's the TCHC human rights investigation. If you Google Ombudsman Toronto, you'll find our website, and then there's a section on investigation reports.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yes, Danielle.
Thanks for the presentation. I was curious to learn a little bit more about how the complaints process from an individual works. So, from what I understand, someone will approach the Ombuds office. The Ombuds office will ensure that all of the other avenues of being exhausted, kind of through traditional city services, and then presumably there's also some work that's done to kind of validate or recognize the complaint, establish like its legitimacy. What does that look like?
Yeah, so we have a team of complaints analysts. So they're the frontline staff who receive complaints. So folks can submit complaints to us by phone or by email, or we have a web form as well on our website. And so the first line is our frontline staff will evaluate that. Typically, the first question we'll ask is it jurisdictional? So is this about the City of Toronto, or is it about a non-jurisdictional body? Is it about a bank or another level of government? So if it's something we can look at, have they escalated their complaint? So they'll look at whether or not there are opportunities, as an office of last resort, are there opportunities for the city to try to fix this or try to address this complaint? So kind of look at the different paths that the person can maybe take, help them, guide them through that process. And if they've already got a final response from the city, then that's where we do a bit more of an in-depth review. And so that's either done at that level, or we have investigators as well who can handle individual complaints, and we'll look to see if the city's treated people fairly, whether the city's been following its policies and procedures, whether they've been responsive, whether they've missed anything. And if that's the case, then we can work with the city. So we often go kind of back and forth between the complainant and city staff, and we say, well, listen, is there a way we can come to a resolution here? And often that is the case. We resolve, I think it's over 90% of our complaints that way. And then the really kind of the thornier, the stickier ones that we can't get resolution, there's a possibility of a formal investigation, which means actually issuing a notice of investigation to the city, doing a big formal investigation that results in a report that we then table before City Council with recommendations to address the matter.
So I just also like to add that we would encourage people to contact our office if they're unsure as to whether or not they have an issue that we can deal with. As Luke said, our complaint analyst will work through that process with them. And if it's a matter that doesn't fall within our ability to deal with, so quite often it's not unusual for us to get complaints about other levels of government, maybe ODSP, for example, or unemployment insurance. We would do our best to find a proper referral or someone that this individual can speak to or contact and help them navigate the way through that process. But yeah, we do our best to find a proper referral if it's something that we can't deal with properly. And as Luke said, the vast majority of our concerns are resolved in an informal basis through this process that we call shuttle diplomacy. which is a little different from ordinary mediation. We don't usually have both parties in the same room at the same time, but as Luke said, we would speak with the complainant, get information from them, and then use that information to speak to the city division that's involved to understand their position and try to find an opportunity to resolve the complaint at the earliest opportunity.
Follow on.
I also just want to wrap my head around like the volume of this. How many complaints does the Ombudsman receive in general, and then what proportion of that is related to housing?
So we've seen an increase in the number of complaints received over the last 5 years. I believe last year we handled approximately 3,700 complaints or thereabouts. I'm sorry, I missed the other part of your question.
And of those, like
of those housing. So, as the deputants spoke about, we have jurisdiction over Toronto community housing. So, a large number of complaints that we see on the general side have some relationship to housing, usually TCHC. So, I would maybe around 1,200, 1,300 complaints each year have to do with housing in all manner. So it runs the continuum. So it could be something as simple as maintenance issues, but it could be something more serious like pending eviction or priority transfer, things of those natures.
I think Joy had a question.
I did, but Danielle asked it, so thank you.
Okay. Yes.
Sorry. I'm just curious, has the Ombudsman Office ever done an investigation into the effectiveness of the rental replacement policy and evaluated to what extent developers are meeting rental replacement requirements when it comes to buildings that have undergone demolition?
So no, we haven't done a formal investigation. I will say that that's an issue that's on our radar, though. We're certainly aware that dem evictions is a live issue, and we're figuring out the best way that we can approach that. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. So just following on that and thinking about how your office can or might work with this committee. These are issues I think that will be coming to our attention. They are systemic in nature. Is it appropriate that as we look at these issues that we may, while recognizing the independence and accountability of the Ombuds Office, we can't direct you to do anything, but we can recommend that you consider looking at these issues as they come across our radar or as they become issues that we want to see sort of further work happen on?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we welcome, if you've spotted issues that you think might be useful for us to look at, we absolutely would welcome that, hearing about it. And I would say too, the reverse will likely be true as we develop our relationship between the Housing Rights Advisory Committee and Ombudsman Toronto's Housing Unit. We expect that we'll be bringing matters to your attention as well, things that we might not look at for a variety of reasons. Being able to direct them to your committee for action might be a possibility as well.
Terrific. And so as your reports come out, we can hope to invite you to present those reports to us or that type of thing so that we can identify where our voice or our recommendations to city committees or council might look like based on the work that you've done.
I think so, yeah, absolutely.
Great. Are there any further questions of the committee? Seeing none, I just want to say thank you to both of you and thank you to our deputants. That was an informative session. Thank you. Look forward to working with you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving along, we have the next on our agenda is Our Plan Toronto, Chapter 1 of the Official Plan. We have a presentation from Jeff Cantos, the Manager of Official Plan and Legislation. And there's Jeff and someone else, so I will turn it over to you to introduce yourself because I don't have your name in front of me. Oh, sorry, I missed a line. What have I received? Yes, sorry, I don't have it in my script. So is that a motion?
Yes.
I'd like to move that we receive the information from item 1 and as information received. And we put that to a vote?
Yes.
All in favor? Saroja, thank you. And online, Anne Marie is yes, yes. Nicole, thank you. Opposed, none, carried. Thank you. Over to planning. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Jeff Cantos. I'm the manager of the official plan and legislation team within City Planning, and I'm joined with my colleague Liam O'Toole, a planner also with City Planning. And we're here to present the official plan review as it relates to our look at the new Chapter 1. So this item, the new Chapter 1 of our official plan, was before Planning and Housing Committee and Council earlier, and it was an official plan amendment to our official plan number 718, and it was to request, our report was to request that the chief planner provide a presentation to this committee before the end of the year, and that the chief planner apply additional considerations as additional considerations in increasing housing supply and choice. So that went to committee earlier this year, and then following at City Council, we received additional directions that do not require amendments to Chapter 1. Some of them being to include a greater focus on African, Caribbean, and Black communities as we implement the official plan, engaging with faith-based organizations, and continuing our Community Leaders Circle. The CLC, the Community Leaders Circle, was a group of representatives, working with or part of equity-deserving groups across the city that we consulted with throughout the Our Plan Toronto program from 2020 to 2024. And members of the CLC, we engaged with, did a kind of a DIY consultation where through Honorarium, we capacity build with them. They talked to their constituents and came back to us. So for example, we didn't consult directly with homeless youth in Rexdale, but a member of a homeless youth worker in Rexdale was part of our CLC. There was another direction from City Council to prioritize the reduction of fossil fuel consumption through new development. So the recommended Chapter 1 that was, as I mentioned, adopted by Council earlier this year. Why it matters is that the official plan is a document that all municipalities in Ontario must adopt that sets out the land use vision, the long-term land use vision, and it helps inform future policies, practices, and land use decisions. We did the review of Chapter 1 now because the previous Chapter 1 was written back and adopted in 2002, post the amalgamation, and it had a different purpose. It was to unite 6 municipalities. Now, 20 years later, we have set out, and Council has adopted a new vision, a new land use vision for the city. And in developing the new Chapter 1, we did the engagement through the pandemic, and most of it was online and virtual. And a lot of the questions that we asked as we took the opportunity to engage with Torontonians was when the rhetoric was about Build Back Better, our question was, well, what does better look like? And how then can we as land use planners translate that into land use policy? So today's Chapter 1, as I mentioned, yesterday's Chapter 1, as Council's already adopted the new, had 7-8 pages, 5 different sections, and what we recommended to City Council was a different organization of the Chapter 1. So you'll see on the screen, there are some new sections, a new section called Toward Reconciliation. We kind of broke out the principles for a successful city into our priorities, our vision, our principles, and then we also included a new section on having your say in planning our city that I'll talk about in a bit. So I'll take you through some of these sections. Toward Reconciliation, this is a new section in our official plan, and we have taken the opportunity to have the official plan help us to repair our relationship with First Nation, Métis, and Inuit peoples across the city and around. And so in our new official plan, when you turn to the first page, it talks about how the official plan can help move us towards a future where worldviews, cultures, and ways of life are respected, celebrated, and prominent in Toronto. And we have we use what are called sidebars within our document, and these sidebars are some explanatory text that can help you understand kind of what we were intending in the body of the text. So we have a sidebar of Toronto that originates from the Mohawk word Toronto, meaning the place in the water where the trees are standing. So you'll see on the bottom of these slides some of the other sidebars that we have, that Council has adopted. We also, and then we move on to planning for Toronto's future. The new Chapter 1 reflects the collective input that we received throughout our multi-year engagement process. And again, the questions of how Toronto should grow and evolve, what makes Toronto unique, and why Toronto matters to them. So we do acknowledge that Toronto will continue to grow, and our the question that we pose to ourselves, well, if we're going to continue to grow, the Chapter 1 is to help understand how we will grow. Next slide, please. So the next section is about our city's priorities, and the priorities are broken into 4 sections: advancing reconciliation, taking action on climate change and its impacts, addressing housing demand, and removing barriers. And I'll just read one line of this section that reads, the official plan takes a human rights-based approach to housing and seeks to enable a wider range of housing options for all. This means looking beyond the height and look of buildings and and toward making the best use of space to enable more housing where it is needed the most. So on to our vision. Again, the official plan projects out into 30 years. So this Chapter 1 in the OP goes out to 2051. Again, this section is broken into 4 different sections: a city of complete communities, a sustainable and resilient city, Toronto being the most inclusive city in the world, and a city that contributes to a just future for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. So I'll take you through these components. A complete community, we know as land use planners that when we plan for and achieve complete communities, that can help eliminate disparities experienced by Torontonians. We also know that we also aspire that Toronto will be a more safe, walkable, and mixed income complete communities that create a sense of place, again, as I mentioned, reduce disparities, and enabling residents to conveniently accessing necessities of daily life. Sustainable and resilient. This component of our vision is parallel to the city's Transform TO initiative, which helps us get to net zero by 2040. And here, the aspirations are that Toronto will reach net zero and become more resilient to climate change. Number 3. The third part of our vision is that Toronto is to become the most inclusive city in the world. We know that diversity is one of our strengths, but in order to remain so, we have to have an intended purpose and goals to achieve that, including universal accessibility. So the sidebar here, an anecdote that helped us devise this sidebar is through our engagement with the Toronto Accessibility Advisory Committee. They talked about a couple of winters ago when there was a bad snowstorm and the city wasn't so quick to clear sidewalks. Folks in mobility devices did not feel safe. They could not live in an independent and spontaneous life. So we wanted to highlight the need for considering universal accessibility in all our planning matters. The fourth component is that the city contributes to a just and future for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples in Toronto, and this is about us telling ourselves that we need to work honestly and with integrity to create and repair relationships to restore truth, justice, and reconciliation. So moving on to our principles. So we're usually asked, great vision, how do we get there? And our answer is, if we were to apply these 4 principles to our land use decision making, it can guide us forward to address the priorities to pursue this vision. So our 4 priorities are reconciliation, access, equity, and inclusion. And I'll take you through these really quickly. In terms of reconciliation, as I mentioned earlier, this principle is about creating and repairing meaningful, ongoing relationships with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, along with working with urban Indigenous organizations that operate in Toronto. In terms of access, herein lies the ability to use a word that can mean many different things. It's about access to affordable housing, for people's access to good transit, the businesses' access to a good labor pool. But here, it's about enabling the access for everyone, regardless of age, income, ability, race, ethnicity, gender, and any other attribute. It is about having convenient and safe access to those components of daily life listed on the screen. A couple more. In terms of equity, one of our principle of equity is about identifying and removing the barriers faced by Toronto's most marginalized and vulnerable residents. Some examples are eliminating practices of systemic exclusion, discrimination, and displacement of marginalized, racialized populations, including women and the 2S LGBTQ+ community. Lastly, in our principles is about inclusion, and this principle is about the considerations of creating cohesive and complete communities, and for all, regardless of age and ability. So implementation, again, the official plan is a visionary document that includes land use policies, but we hope that Chapter 1, the newly adopted Chapter 1, can help inform future reviews of the official plan and help inform land use decision-making as we go forward, including local area studies, what we call secondary plans, and other documents that help inform planning on the ground. A new section in the official in Chapter 1 is about having your say, and this is, a call to action for us at the city to continue to work with Torontonians as we monitor, evaluate, and implement the official plan, and also a call to action for our Torontonians, businesses, and other stakeholders to continue to be involved in the growing of the city. Okay, thank you, and I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you very much. So to the committee, does anyone have any questions on the plan, Chapter 1 of the plan? I think it was very well spelled out. One question from Danielle.
I was just curious about, you alluded to Chapter 1, it was last updated post-amalgamation. How frequently is the official plan updated? It sounds like each chapter kind of is independent, and how frequently are each of them revisited, and what triggers that?
To the chair, so yes, the official plan that we have today was written back in 2022, again post-amalgamation, and since then we've been reviewing the official plan constantly, but thematically. And so usually what ends up happening is the province will change the environmental policies, so we update our plans to follow suit. Maybe 10 years ago, the province changed the Ontario Heritage Act, so we updated the heritage policies, again, to follow suit. So we're constantly reviewing and evaluating, but as for Chapter 1, it hasn't been reviewed since it was adopted back in 2002.
So what triggered the review? Was it provincial legislation? Was it like an internal process?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the Planning Act requires municipalities to review their official plan every 5 years, or every 10 years if it's a new official plan. So we review it every 5 years, and because we were reviewing our employment area policies and intensification around transit, and we were doing it virtually, we took the opportunity to also consult on Chapter 1.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Not seeing any other questions. I would like to thank the staff for the report and the briefing on on the revised Chapter 1. I would move to receive the item for information. All in favor? Looking online to see if we have all in favor. Anne Marie is a yes. Nicole is a yes. And thank you very much. Motion carried. Thank you. So moving to item HS 2.3, an overview of Toronto's shelter system and support for people experiencing homelessness. We have Toronto Shelter and Support Services. There is a presentation from Joseph Stalteri, Director, Service Planning and Integrity, Toronto Shelter and Support Services. Joseph, I turn it over to you.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair. I'm Joseph Stalteri. I'm with Toronto Shelter and Support Services. I'm the Director of Service System Planning and Integrity. I am joined by my colleague, Ashley Dalton, who is the manager of our Strategic Policy and Service Planning team. And thank you for having us. I'm looking forward to sharing with you our overview of our Toronto Shelter and Support Services mandate, the services that we support for people who are experiencing homelessness, and some of our priorities for this year. Toronto Shelter and Support Services is the city's division that manages the emergency shelter system in Toronto. We work closely with many other divisions, including the Housing Secretariat. Toronto Shelter and Support Services' top priority is to ensure people experiencing homelessness have access to temporary accommodations when they need it, as well as wraparound support services to help ensure that homelessness is rare, brief, and non-recurring. We have a coordinated access approach that we use, which is a proven best practice internationally. And this is an approach that we've adopted to help modernize and improve the systems that we use to help assess needs, to prioritize access to appropriate housing options, and to improve housing outcomes and reduce chronic homelessness. And you can see from this slide that we have a number of services that allow us to support and assess the needs of individuals looking to access shelter services. Underlying this approach and our services is the housing first principles that we've adopted and form the foundation for how we work with individuals who need our services. And this approach focuses on rapid access to housing without the need for people to be housing ready. So without the need for people to accept treatment or to be abstinent from substance use. The approach also is a strength-based approach and people-centered approach to meet people's needs where they're at. And that helps us to identify choice and where folks are looking for support and the housing that best fits their needs. And this approach facilitates positive integration into the community and ensures that the housing that people access is housing that works for them over the longer term. To ensure that people experiencing homelessness have access to emergency shelter, our division works with community partners and stakeholders to deliver person-centered, outcome-focused services to help improve the overall well-being of individuals experiencing homelessness and connect them with housing. And our services fall under three main areas. We provide emergency shelter and support programs. We provide street outreach. And you've heard some of the presentations earlier. The Streets to Homes program is an example of a program that conducts street outreach services, and I'll talk more about that in some of our later slides. And we also provide 24-hour respite and drop-in programs. Toronto Shelter and Support Services manages a complex system of shelters. More than 100 emergency and transitional shelter locations are provided across the city. These include emergency shelter locations, 24-hour respite sites, 24-hour women's drop-in centers, and temporary shelter programs that were open during the COVID-19 pandemic. This was done to create physical distancing to align with public health directives. As well, as I mentioned, we also deliver the Streets to Homes street outreach program and a range of prevention and housing support services. Our shelter programs in Toronto are delivered by both the City of Toronto and community agencies, so we call that a mixed delivery model. And those community agencies receive funds from the City of Toronto they adhere to Toronto shelter standards. We often get asked about the violence against women's shelters, and I will just clarify that. It's often a question that we get. That shelter system is delivered by the province, but we work very closely with the violence against women sector to help facilitate access to the appropriate space. The City of Toronto has the most shelter beds per capita of any large city in Canada. This slide highlights that. We also highlight on this slide the jurisdictions within the GTA as well. You'll see that in the light blue. And despite Toronto having the most shelter beds per capita, next slide please, the system is at full capacity most nights. The system is currently serving twice as many people as it was 6 years ago, and that's despite continually adding new beds. There is an ever-increasing pressure on the shelter system. Currently, Toronto Shelter and Support Services is accommodating more than 12,000 people. More than 9,800 people are in the city's shelter system proper, and approximately 2,200 people are being supported outside the shelter system in bridging programs and other programs run by the Canadian Red Cross. Just over 5,900 people being accommodated are refugee claimants. And in the first 3 months of 2024, there was an average of 160 callers per night to our central intake. That could not be matched to a shelter space. So just to give you the context of the current demand for shelter in our city, it is significant. And again, that is despite the city's investment in additional shelter spaces. Talk a little bit more about our central intake services that I referenced. This service is a 24/7 telephone-based service that offers referrals to emergency shelter and other overnight accommodations. It's to help connect people experiencing homelessness to those shelters and supports. And anyone can access central intake by calling 311. The Streets to Homes street outreach and support program that I referenced earlier is a service that reaches out to people who are experiencing homelessness and sleeping outdoors. It's available 24/7, it's year-round, and the focus is on building those relationships with people who are experiencing outdoor and unsheltered homelessness. Those relationships are important to ensuring that folks have someone that they can trust to help address their immediate needs, whether they be health and safety needs, whether they be the immediate need for shelter. And those services and supports are really focused primarily on helping people to move into housing and access those supports. Now, we do know that people experiencing homelessness, whether these are people that are accessing our shelter services or people that are sleeping outdoors, have different needs. And we've done a number of, undertaken a number of initiatives over the years to better assess and understand the needs of people who are experiencing homelessness. In 2021, we conducted the street needs assessment, and this is a needs assessment survey and a point in time count of people experiencing homelessness in Toronto. And it showed, as you can see from this slide, that 15% approximately of people who are experiencing homelessness identify as Indigenous. 5% people are veterans, and 18% have had experience in foster care. 26% of people, particularly youth, identify as 2S LGBTQ, and 59% identify as member of racialized groups. So the needs are quite diverse and varied, and our focus of our services are to ensure that those needs are being met as best we can. And this slide here as well speaks to the various health challenges as well. And you can see here that approximately 50% of people accessing our services have mental health issues. And together, these data show that the shelter system really does need to provide and facilitate access to a variety of supports to meet these various needs. And to help meet those needs, our shelter spaces are a critical component of that. We are working on developing new shelters. Recently, City Council adopted the Housing Services Capital Infrastructure Strategy. And that will allow us to, and I'll speak more about that in a moment, but that will allow us to create new shelter spaces that will focus on environmental design to improve outcomes, and new program models that focus on case management and rapid rehousing. And this slide just speaks to some of the examples that new shelter spaces will focus on meeting. Some of our priority initiatives for this year. I mentioned the capital infrastructure strategy, and this, as I said, was approved by council recently. This is a 10-year roadmap to transition the city's shelter infrastructure from primarily emergency-focused responses, and in particular temporary shelter spaces that I mentioned earlier were opened in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and transition that to a system that's rooted in more proactive strategic capital planning and decision making. It will include a plan, and does include a plan, to develop 1,600 new shelter beds over the next 10 years. Another key priority for us is safety in the shelter system. We've heard this for a number of years and have already been taking action, but more recently, the Center for Addiction and Mental Health released its study on safety in shelters. This is an important study. It was done in partnership with the City of Toronto and several other community homelessness service providers. The report proposed 22 recommendations to advance safety in the shelter system, and this report was endorsed by Economic and Community Development Committee in April of this year. Toronto Shelter and Support Services continues to prioritize improving shelter safety for staff and service users of our system. And in response to that, we are developing a shelter safety action plan to implement the CAMH study recommendations, as well as implement a number of initiatives that we've identified as a system, along with our sector partners and people with lived experience. Encampments are unfortunately a symptom of housing affordability in the City of Toronto and the crisis related to housing affordability. but Toronto Shelter and Support Services have been working to provide enhanced outreach and support services to people who are living outdoors and living in encampments. We thank the Ombudsman recently for their investigation and interim and final report that proposed a number of recommendations to the City of Toronto to improve how we support people living in encampments. And we will be providing an update to Council on the work that the City has been doing to implement the Ombudsman's recommendations, including updating the City's interdepartmental protocol, which outlines a process that is clear and transparent and guides the coordinated work across City divisions to respond to encampments and support people who are living in encampments. And I'll speak a bit more about the work that we are doing to support people in encampments. Since 2021, the city had adopted an enhanced housing-focused outreach and support model that was applied to Dufferin Grove Park, which was a large entrenched encampment, and experienced great success in applying that model. That has been applied to Allen Gardens most recently and is now being applied to Clarence Square. And this approach and this model provides enhanced outreach and support services to people living in those encampments. It's rooted in relationship building, addressing health and safety needs, and connecting people to shelter and support services, as well as housing. And recently, as I mentioned, in Allen Gardens, we've been able to house 97 people from Allen Gardens and referred indoors 309 people. And the number of encampments when we first applied this enhanced approach at Allen Gardens was 84 encampments, and it is now down to below 11. So the process works, and we want to be able to continue to provide this enhanced support. And that's my presentation. Thank you, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. We have actually a number of speakers. Do I go to the committee first or to the speakers first? Speakers first. So the committee, we will come back to you for questions. We do have a list of 10 speakers who have signed up to address the committee. I don't believe they're here in person. I'm not sure that they're online. So we will go through. I will call out each, and if they're available, then we will invite them to join. So first, I will ask, can we confirm that our first speaker, Egypt, is ready to proceed? Not online. Thank you. The second speaker who has asked to speak to us today is Nahum Mann. Is Nahum available? In the room? No. Online? No. Thank you. The next speaker is Sid Jackson. Not online. Thank you. The next speaker is Lisa LeBlanc. Not available. The next speaker listed is Lucy Pascoe. Not in the room, not online. Thank you. Crystal Steele. Not available. Next, Alex. Not available. Thank you. Carlito. Not available. Thank you. James Harrison. Not available. And finally, Dreads Organization. Not available. Okay, thank you. So those were the people who had signed up to speak to us. Not available. I would also note, and just this is a note for committee members, we did receive a number, dozens of communications from residents regarding questions around shelters. This is not unusual. I think it's quite common for residents to submit letters of concern or interest to committees. That is available on our portal, the HRAC, wherever all of our information. Oh, we have our speakers in the room. All right, we will start again. What's that? Okay, that's okay. We're just going to go back and start. We literally just called your names and we'll start again. So it's fine. Okay, that's great. So we will start again at the top of the list. So back to the list. Is Egypt here? Okay, thank you. Nahum Man. All right, you're first. I would remind you, you have 5 minutes. I'll set the timer. And over to you. Thank you.
Group called Voices for Unhoused Liberation. Yeah,
it's on.
It's on? Okay, cool. We are an anti-poverty group. Our members are all folks living in poverty, who are underhoused or are homeless currently. And we've been working in the city as a formal group for about 2 years. And I just wanted to touch on the condition of the shelter system and of the homelessness crisis. A lot of us have been doing this work for longer than we've been around, but in the 2 years that we've been operating, what's been very clear is that the city is dropping the ball and really failing the homeless community. We have seen mass clearings in the shelter hotels, like the Novotel, the Bond, the Strathcona, the Roehampton, where closures force out hundreds of people en masse to parts of the city far away from their communities and their networks of support, or pushed out onto the streets to live in precarity. Oftentimes when folks are moved from shelter hotels into other shelters, they're faced with a 2-bag limit after being told that their placement in a shelter hotel is a pathway to independent living and housing, meaning that they are moved in, preparing for that next step to move into an apartment, to move into Toronto community housing, what it may be. They're collecting their belongings, they're acquiring things, they're getting ready for that move, only to be put back at ground zero, forced to decide what 2 garbage bags of belongings they want to keep, while the rest is discarded, is stolen, is thrown out behind the shelter hotels. We've also seen the clearings. Obviously, we know about the intense encampment clearings from a few years ago, but this has continued as well. We saw the clearings at the St. Stephen's encampment, resulting in concrete blocks being laid on a plot of grass to prevent people from putting up tents there. At the Trinity Square, Church of the Holy Trinity encampment, trespass notices were given out. And when we confronted the encampment office about why the trespass notices were provided, we were told that this was an educational tool, that people didn't believe that they were breaking city no camping bylaws, and this was a way to educate them about the law. We've also seen the flagrant misuse of service restrictions in the shelters, in the shelter hotels. I've seen the report, the CAMH report, that does provide a little bit of insight onto how arbitrary service restrictions are used, and really highlights the fact that what is happening is that the safety of staff is prioritized over the safety and well-being of unhoused folks. And so service restrictions, while they're coded in the Toronto Shelter Standards as being a last resort effort in extreme situations, are being doled out arbitrarily for all kinds of things. One of our members was kicked out of Seton House for eating in the TV room, service restricted from a city-run shelter for eating in the TV room. And the thing is that the city does not view unhoused people as people living within the housing spectrum. They are viewed as unmarked, unnamed clients to services. They do not have rights that tenants are given to protect them, give them due process, give them due diligence. And so this attitude about unhoused people trickles out into the shelters, into streets to homes. And I know I have 10 seconds left, but I'm really strongly suggesting that this advisory committee stands behind our call right now, which is a full moratorium on service restrictions, encampment clearings, and all other methods that evict unhoused people from their homes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before you leave, are there any questions of the committee for our speaker? Go ahead, Joy.
This is a real easy one. I didn't catch the name of the organization that you're representing.
It's Voices for Unhoused Liberation.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you for addressing the committee today and for coming down to do it in person. Next on the list is Sid Jackson. Is Sid here?
Hello, my name is Sid Jackson, and I have worked as an activist and cultural producer in unhoused and criminalized community for over 30 years. Currently, I'm an organizer with Voices for Unhoused Liberation, and we do outreach, advocacy, and organizing at the Delta Hotel Shelter, as well as other shelter and encampment sites in the city. The mandate of Voices for Unhoused Liberation is to form a union with shelter and encampment residents so they can build collective power in order to confront the war on the poor conducted by this city. I'm speaking today on recent changes to the Delta Hotel Shelter program and the harms that will come as a result. Currently, when a room becomes available at the Delta, it will not be made accessible to the general unhoused community as it has been in the past. It will be reserved for refugees only. The Delta is an important program in the spectrum of shelters. Residents have their own room and can develop a modicum of stability. It's one of the few programs with full harm reductions, like programs, resources. It's also pet friendly, it welcomes couples and people of all genders. Doors that lock are a really big deal. The Delta is a vibrant and complex community where people support each other in order to survive being unhoused. But like unhoused communities everywhere, Delta residents are treated as disposable and displaceable. Given the dearth of housing options, the main mechanism by which shelter beds come available for the newly mandated clients is through service restrictions, a practice the harms of which are not even close to being represented in the recent CAMH report or in the presentation that you will hear today. I would characterize the report as highly irresponsible to the realities of shelter residents. The reality of the shelter system is simply that unhoused people are being warehoused in a carceral space of one-direction power over residents, a system that holds residents under the threat of service restriction, of losing their beds if they speak out or defend themselves from staff harms. Rules are used to control and threaten residents, not to keep people safe. What we see is that staff do not have the skills to navigate situations and provide for the needs that residents have. As noted in the CAMH report, many are afraid of unhoused people. They refuse to listen to clients, lack empathy, and are quick to judge, and thus they are incompetent at these jobs. The reasons a person might be service restricted can be so minor or even made up, which does not compare to the consequence of losing your shelter bed. The harms caused by service restrictions especially impact those who are most vulnerabilized already, people with disabilities. People with disabilities are the major population that experience being kicked out of the shelter system. LGBTQ people, youth. These are people who use drugs, the people who are least able to advocate for themselves. There is no effective appeals process for restrictions. Basically, the people doing the restrictions review restrictions and decide without necessarily even talking to the client. This is the fault of both TSSS and City Council. There's a lack of oversight. The Toronto Shelter Standards, it looks good on paper, but is not enacted in the shelter system. Indeed, if there weren't for the documented 6,000 service restrictions given out in the last year, there would be less movement in the shelter system as a whole. The shelters would become semi-permanent housing, and the encampments would also become a fixture in the landscape. Constant displacement is a necessity for the shelter system as it is. The notion that shelters are a pathway to housing is basically a joke. The Delta has maybe 1 or 2 inaccessible housing workers for 340 people. Like central intake, where you are lucky to get through to a worker, and even luckier if there happens to be a bed at that exact moment, the housing wait list is a black box. No one knows where they are on the list or even if they are on it or not. They see people who have been on the list for a short amount of time getting housing when they think they've been on the list for years. But are they on it? It's hard to know. Housing is a basic need and a human right. Such lack of transparency on how to access shelter and housing is psychologically damaging. I am here to make some demands. Our immediate demand is that you keep the Delta Hotel Shelter accessible to all unhoused people, including refugees. There are refugees staying there already. They're welcome in that community, but to limit this particular shelter to refugees only harms the larger population of unhoused people. We demand a moratorium on service restrictions, the main mechanism by which the transition to a refugee-only shelter will happen. Since there are a dearth of shelter beds and housing, we demand no encampment evictions. We demand that you expand the shelter system in order to accommodate refugees who also need shelter and supports, as well as unhoused people currently living on the streets. We demand accountability from the City of Toronto for the harms perpetrated against the unhoused community. We demand that the city deeply engage with an independent body of unhoused people in all changes to the system and programs that address homelessness. I just want to say there are no safe places in this city for an unhoused person. They're not allowed on the streets. They're kicked out of shelter. Toronto community housing is infested and dangerous. Unhoused people have no place to be, and this is a travesty. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Before you go, are there any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much. Next, we have on the list Lisa LeBlanc.
Hi, I live with multiple chemical sensitivities. The shelter system does not accommodate very well for this. Every day I'm affected by colognes, perfumes, chemicals. It even affects my food. Last night I didn't have dinner because I can't eat farmed fish and they sent me fish for dinner. And this has happened a lot lately where I can't eat the food. And even when I complain in a timely manner, they still won't prepare something else for me, so I go without eating. Oh my gosh. It's just been very difficult for me. I have, it affects my cognitive. It affects my breathing. It makes me all jittery, gives me headaches. And oftentimes I'm sitting in my room with my mask on and I can't even stay in there because the cologne or whatever is so thick. And when I complain to staff, they say they'll check it out, but a lot of times they don't. This is a disability. I'm covered under the Disabilities Act. they should try harder to try to accommodate for everybody. This needs to be a safe space for everybody. I'm part of that, everybody. I don't know what else to say. I was discharged from 702 Kennedy Road because of my disability, which I was just discovering certain food allergies. I was talking to some friends of mine in the dining room saying that when I eat the food, it's like I'm eating poison. It injures me inside. Somebody heard the word poisoning and said, oh my God, the chef is poisoning the food. That ran to management like wildfire, and I was discharged for slandering the chef. They didn't have any place for me to go. This was Easter weekend. It was cold, and I was just thrown out, and when I asked for a chair to wait for Wheel-Trans to come and get me, they said, no, as a matter of fact, you have to be off the property by 5 o'clock. So I had to get a cab to drive me over to the Tim Hortons nearby and arrange for Wheel-Trans to pick me up there because they wouldn't let me stay on the property. I didn't know my rights because I should have stayed, and the police would have seen that this was an illegal discharge. They're not allowed to discharge without having an alternative place for me to go. I've been in the shelter system for 9.5 years. This has been a struggle for the whole 9.5 years that I've been in there. I was at another shelter, and the woman that I was sharing a room with used soap, and I'm allergic to that. So for 6 weeks, I was sleeping in the basement, and they kept coming down and telling me, you can't sleep down here. And I said, well, I can't go to my room. And one night they actually they tried to grab me and bring me upstairs, and I thought, go ahead and grab me because that's assault. And they transferred me again to 702 Kennedy after I'd already been kicked out of there. And there were so many chemicals there, I suffered. I had to spend most of my time sitting outside because there's something in the air quality there. I can't breathe inside the building. It hurts my lungs. So, you know, I don't know what can be done about this, but this is not right. People shouldn't be like kicked out of the streets because of disability. You know, it wasn't my fault. Like I said, I was just discovering certain things. So, you know, this was all new to me. And then to be, you know, kicked out over it was really disturbing. And so I went to 129 Peter and was traumatized there. And I live with childhood trauma, so it was just a very, very traumatic, unsettling time. I'll never forget it. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that is difficult to share in front of the committee, and I appreciate the courage it took to do that. Before you go, are there any questions from the committee for the speaker? Thank you, then.
Thank you so much.
Next on the list, we have Lucy Pascoe. Is Lucy here?
I'm just going to sit with her for support.
That's fine.
Hi, my name is Lucy Pascoe. I am from Mexico. Somebody speak Spanish here? You? Oh, porque necesito un poco de ayuda. ¿Puedo hablar en español y tú me traduces? Oh, gracias. Ok, yo estuve en el primer shelter.
Hola,
¿qué tal? Muchas gracias.
Bien.
Lucy. Estuve en Kennedy y Eglinton. ¿Fue en el primer shelter?
My friend says that she was housed in the shelter in Kennedy and
Eglinton.
Eglinton.
Ok, Yo traje mi gatita de México porque es mi soporte emocional.
She brought from Mexico her animal support, which is a cat from Mexico.
Ok, no podía estar con ella porque no se permitía en la habitación, pero
She was told that animals are not allowed in the shelter.
ok, yo traté de promover cosas productivas para el shelter.
She tried to be the progressive voice for the staff in the shelter.
Deportes, actividades. Yo fui voluntaria dando clases de cumbia y salsa.
She promoted ideas for recreational purposes like cumbia, salsa dance to the shelter residents.
Y yoga.
And yoga.
Porque había mucha gente con problemas de drogas y con
disabilities.
Sí, sí.
Because she realizes that a lot of the residents in the shelter system, they have mental health issues. Hey, I have one. And physical necessities, right? So she's willing to help. Want to be positive.
Yes, but the manager, one time I asked for a net. Okay, pedí una net, para voleibol.
Okay. She approached the manager of the shelter for a net to play. Okay.
Voleibol.
Volleyball.
Porque había los tubos ahí en el parque para voleibol.
Because apparently in the park, in the city-owned park, there was the frames ready to hold the net.
Y una chica del staff me llevó la red y cuando la pusimos, la manager nos hizo quitarla.
The manager, in a sudden change of mind, decided to not to let them to have the net on the grounds where they were going to have a basketball, volleyball game.
Y algunas personas les dan más de comer, a otras no nos quieren dar de comer.
So there is a total favoritism or injustice, whatever which you want to see it. Some people they're given food in large amounts, some are less given food.
Me enviaron a otro shelter a 5,800 de Young.
And she was transferred to another shelter on Young Street 1800.
Sí. Y ahí fue peor porque no me dejaban ni siquiera estar con mi gatita. Ellos tienen un área para mascotas.
Her experience was worse because her kitten was not allowed to be with her, and although she claims that there's a space for animals to live in the shelter.
Me acosaba el staff, iban muchas personas porque no querían que yo estuviera con mi gatita en su jaula.
Staff will harass me because I will not be allowed to be next to my cat, cage.
Hubo ocasiones en que me tuve que meter a la jaula con mi gatita para poder estar con ella.
My friend experienced a very sad experience that she wanted to be with her kitten, and she had to break the rules and be in the enclosure area where the pets are kept. Because she was sad.
Sí, mi gatita siempre estaba llorando porque sentía mi depresión.
She feels that her cat was always stressed out because she can feel her owner for this depression.
Ahora estoy tomando antidepresivos, fui a terapia psicológica, porque lejos de ser un refugio donde uno encuentre protección, es lo contrario. A veces uno termina loco, sale uno loco de ahí.
Oh, loco.
Es muy sucio.
So my friend is currently taking medications, psychological treatment for depression, anxiety,
insomnio.
Insomnio.
Promueven el bullying.
In fact, it's a very toxic environment, let's put it that way, where she's at.
Yo sé que regresando es posible que me quieran correr porque han intentado mandarme a la calle, pero no tengo miedo.
She's a very strong woman. She's a very strong woman, and she is challenging the management to throw her out to the street.
Gracias.
Gracias.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Gracias. Before you go, are there any questions from the committee?
I have evidence about so many things.
She has some evidence to show about her struggle. Anyone want to see it?
If you have documentation, the clerk can take that from you. Again, I thank you. I appreciate the courage it has taken for you to come in and share all of this with you. Oh, sorry, Lindsay has a question.
I just want to say thank you. I lost my dog because it wasn't allowed in the shelter either. So I think that's a really challenging thing because that, it still haunts me.
Perdió su perrito también en una experiencia similar con la tuya, así que tiene paciencia, empatía con tu caso.
Thank you. It's very hard. And they no are human. A ellos no les importa nuestra salud y nuestra seguridad. Hay personas que sí nos ayudan, yo sé. Hay personas que sí son buenas, pero si de arriba...
Sí.
Well,
Entiendo.
it's the same problem, revolving door problem that we have with the city of Toronto, abusing people who are considered to be just a number, not just a person. Thank you.
Thank you, Miguel, for helping.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Lucy.
Give 24 hours, sister.
Muchas gracias.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. The next speaker on our list is Crystal Steele here.
Hello, my name is Crystal Windsor, okay, and Steele, married name Steele. Windsor is my maiden name. I currently lost a daughter, okay, while I was in the shelter system. I started my shelter system because of the fact of my brother trying to rape me, okay, by ripping my eyes and my head and make me suck him, whatever, I don't want to say it if I'm on TV to be rude to children, okay? And needless to say, my landlord, I ran out of the house to go get help. By the time I got back, he had been shot by my landlord. Okay, that's how my house it started. All right, my daughter is Melissa Steele. Okay, and yes, she is from Picton, BC. Picton, BC is where she was when she was found on the side of the road, raped and murdered and dead. Okay, and I had my other 3 children call me and tell me how she's dead. 10 grand is a lot of money when you're already homeless to try and get your daughter's body home. Do you understand? Okay, so my point to this matter is that she is an Ontario resident, and there's 24 little girls now that have previously, they're apparently the same person has done this to them all. Okay, I tried to tell the staff that this is happening to my daughter when she called me at the Delta. Then I just got told that I was crazy, I was too high. Okay, they wouldn't listen to me, and then all of a sudden 2 months later I get the phone call to have to bury her. Okay, I have been assaulted. I've gone through sexual assault my whole life, and it's been going on and on and on. Unfortunately, okay, this is why I'm so nervous to try and talk to you guys, and I'm talking really fast, okay? But all you guys have children out there, and I never would wish it upon my worst enemy to have to go through anything like that. In my worst nightmare, I wouldn't put it upon them. You understand me? So, right now I'm camping outside of the Delta next to the train tracks because I'm homeless, because of sexual violence. And I have a disability. My seizures are getting okay, and PSD, I'm on disability for. The last shelter I've lived at has been the Delta. I've been service restricted 3 times. The last time was for the sister's brother that's there because asking me a rude question, again, sexual assault, and I picked up a rock and threw it at his head. Okay, because I'm getting really damn tired of this, and yeah, I just got off with 7 charges that I was on for assault because of the fact that the guys were going to gang rape me. All my charges have been dropped. I'm clear, I'm free. Now, as in the last 2 weeks, a month now? That's when I had to call the police to come out to my tent, okay, because the guy that freaking I woke up after taking a seizure, asking him to leave, and he's trying to finger me, and he's all nude. I had to kick him out of my tent, freaking bare nude, and he stole my clothes to get away, and that goes on, okay? So I had to have the police come out and actually look and do their investigation. They took my axe away. When they asked them what side of the axe to use, they used both. You're damn fucking right I did. pardon my language. But now, the most is when I found out about my daughter, and now I've been camped outside for two years, all through winter. I try and get food there, and I just get threatened to get off the property. I can't even access food, I can't access help, I can't even access a counselor to get some mind treatment and help in here, okay? And that's a lot, okay? I want to do positive for this world. I want to do positive for anybody that has ever gone through that, and I just hope to damn it gets better, okay? Oh my gosh.
Take your time. You can take a breath if you want. Just take
they don't give me any supports. The staff lies about me, and they threaten me and verbally assault me, try and physically remove me. Abuse is allowed, like they are allowed to stay. The people that will abuse you, sexually assault you or whatever, they won't listen to you because of, not to be rude, but any race, color, or family members living there that they like better than them. So you're just, it's a grid level of, hey, I like that one, I like that one, I like that one. But you know what? Screw you. That's what they do, okay? If you have any type of intensity to try and speak up for yourself and stick to, moral support, respect, live, love, life, okay? Make sure you keep God with you. Always, if you have any type of moral standards like that and try and remember what your mama taught you, okay, and then do right and good for this world, you're kicked out instantly right away. And they won't ever ask you anything. They won't even ask you what's wrong. And then they steal all your belongings and they just throw you out, and you can't even access a pad when you're in your period. Do you know how embarrassing that is? Okay, ladies, not to be rude, gentlemen, you probably wouldn't like your woman coming home like that either, right? Okay, so, other than that, like I said, I've even been, like I just told you about me being in the tent, and have men attack me, and I have to survive the winters, and I have to go through this and try and remember the loyal standard and the Canadian standards that we have, okay? But the whole judgment system, and sometimes how they're de-escalating or escalating the situations, are not fair and not right. Okay, they're not fair and they're not right at all. I don't know what else to say. If you guys have any questions, you guys have at her. I'll answer them the best I can, but I've never done this before, and happy Mother's Day to all the mothers, and live, love, life, and respect. God be with us all. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Crystal. Thank you very much. That was... I can only imagine.
My daughter's name is Melissa Steele, by the way. Okay, Melissa Elizabeth Steele, Picton, BC. If you guys want to look it up, there's a $127,000 reward, so I can cut that, off as soon as I find him. I swear I will, and I'm saying it. I don't care. I'm telling you the truth. If I find him, I will, because 24 little girls, all the moms and dads are going to help me. I bet you too. So that's the truth. You can look that up if you'd like to. It's all the truth.
Thank you.
I can't access any information about her because of it being RCMP. I don't even know unless I go on the internet and read about how much the thing that my other 3 children have raised that I just told you about. Yeah, I can't even get help for freaking mine. I can't even get the police officers that are there to answer me. Oh, it's not our job. It's not our responsibility. Well, I have no phone. I have nothing. What do I do? How am I not? I can't even go in the building and make a phone call. So how am I going to find out? Wouldn't anybody else want to know if that person's still running around, or if they've been caught? And have that little bit of freedom of your heart, like, oh.
Crystal?
Yep.
Thank you very much for coming in and for sharing with us. I want to turn to the committee if there are any questions. Yes, Lindsay.
I just want to say I love you. It takes a lot of courage, and never give up. Keep going.
I never will. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's premenstrual seizure disorder. If anybody wants to know the name of the disability, I'm on the Disability Act for. Thank you.
I think we have a couple more speakers. I'm not sure who's in the room. Is Alex here? No. Carlito? Could not make it. James Harrison?
Okay, también. Oh my God, should get paid for this, man.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Buenos días. Mi nombre es Ignacio Aparicio. Vengo de la comunidad indígena de Tlaltenango, Tocatica, en Zicacalco, en México.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Ignacio. I am a indigenous people from Mexico.
Mi comunidad tiene aproximadamente solo 100 habitantes, entonces mi infancia todo fue en contacto con la naturaleza.
My community is very small, less than 100 people, and we are very in touch with our wildlife and nature.
Quisiera comenzar mi discurso con lo siguiente. Creo que todos conocemos lo que es vivir, la diferencia a supervivir.
So I would like to start my deputation by telling you that there is a difference between live and survival.
Soy una persona que cree que para tener una vida plena y ver al mundo de colores hay que empezar por uno mismo.
I strongly believe that it comes from oneself if we want to change, to see life in a very positive way.
Ya. Entonces me he enfocado al máximo comenzar desde mí, pero con un lugar así es imposible, es como caminar contra corriente.
Well, I think there is a lot of barriers, and that would not enable me to move forward.
En un lugar en el que fallecen alrededor de 5 personas por mes, se sabe que hay algo mal en ese sistema.
Knowing that every month we lost 5 members of our community is very depressing.
Me he enfocado desde mi pasión por las flores en tratar de transformar, aunque sea visualmente, el lugar, e incluso de esa manera he tenido el impedimento por medio del staff.
My friend has been trying to be positive-minded individual by growing flowers to beautify the space. However, site staff doesn't seem to agree with him in having flowers in the shelter.
Entonces no se diga en otras actividades, en tratar de tener un contacto con las personas y saber qué está pasando, porque están falleciendo, qué ha pasado con sus propósitos de vida, con sus ilusiones.
Well, the question is, what has happened to all these people that have lost their lives? Would they be able to continue with their dreams and goals? We don't know what happened to them.
Se puede percibir entre las personas como cada día están cada vez más degradadas y el sistema está ayudando a eso.
We know how our lives are being affected by the loss of housing, and that leads to a continual detriment of our lives.
La energía y la vibración de ese sitio puede percibirse en el aire sin ni siquiera saber nada, simplemente vayan y sientan la vibra que se vive en ese lugar.
Being in a shelter system is a negative charge environment. I would say it's a toxic place, of course.
Eso es lo que quiero decir.
That's all I had to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just for clarification, your name is Ignacio? Okay, so not James Harrison.
No,
Okay,
James.
it's good. Great. Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the committee? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is James Harrison in the room? No, okay. And the last list on the speakers list is Dread's organization. I'm assuming that's not here either.
Dreads couldn't make it today.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate, yes?
Can I just say that one of our members did submit a written letter, but was notified that it wouldn't be accepted because he's trying to keep his identity anonymous for fear of retribution, and I just want to make a note that that is problematic when folks feel they're under threat of retribution for speaking out on things.
You want to head?
Yes.
The clerk will answer.
I sent him an email this morning and tell him if he agrees to use the abbreviation as his name, we can list his communication online and distribute to HREC members and city staff, but we will not oppose it. I'm still waiting for him to reply to see whether he accepts this or not.
All right, thank you. Thank you to the speakers who joined us, and appreciation for what it took to come down here and share what you did. We appreciate it, and we certainly, I think, have all listened very carefully. So thank you. I want to turn back to the staff whose presentation was made. So Joseph, I don't know if there's questions from the committee to you. Okay, we've got questions. So Chase, you go ahead.
I'm just wondering, at this point, when you're housing all these people, are you coming to a slower rate of houses available? And then will you still be able to keep housing these people in the encampments?
Thanks for the question. Through you, Chair. Affordable housing is a significant issue in the city, and the ability to facilitate access to housing for the significant number of people who are in our shelter system remains a challenge.
Thank you. Bahar, Lindsay, you were next.
Awkward. So I have a couple questions, but the one, I'll just start with the easy one. Where can I access the CAMH report?
Through the chair, the CAMH report can be accessed on the
great.
city's site. If you go to the Economic and Community Development Committee section of the city's website, we can facilitate accessing that.
Yeah, I think it would be great if that report could be distributed among the committee.
Mm-hmm. Is there a maximum time for women and children to stay in the shelter? Because at 6 months, I was about to be relocated. And if I had, I don't know, I believe it's because of my meditation and manifestation and just determination that I was able to get housing that quick, and also timing and probably luck. But that could have been a detriment into the path that I'm on now. Like the trajectory could have been vastly different had I been moved. Because you're 6 months, you kind of develop a community. My housing that I got was within the community, luckily. Is there a time limit that you transfer women and children or people?
Through the chair, there is no time limit to the amount of time someone can stay in the shelter system. We work with individuals to help them access housing as quickly as we can, to develop a housing plan right away, but there is no time limit.
And that's provincially as well, because that is still happening. People, women and children are being transferred out after 6 months.
Through the chair, I can't speak to the provincial system.
Okay. Also, I'm a trauma survivor. I've been also sober for 10 years, so I believe that sobriety is key for trauma survivors. And my ODSP, I had to, it was a mess, and obviously it was also cut off. So these wraparound supports and these, you're saying that there's no time limit for women and children in shelters. Are these new rules that were implemented? Are they being followed? Because I lost income, there were no wraparound supports, and it was very, very difficult because I wasn't getting child support either, and so there was no money. So is that another provincial thing, or are people that are on ODSP or Ontario Works and they are in a shelter system, do they lose their benefits? And if so, why? And can that be mandated that they should still get those benefits because they're so minimal?
Through the chair, there are people who are in our shelter system and are accessing Ontario Works or ODSP do not lose their ODSP or Ontario Works as a result of being in the shelter system.
Just the income for housing.
The shelter allowance.
Yeah. Well, I didn't get shelter allowance. They just removed the housing amount, like what I was paying rent prior to leaving an abusive situation. I lost that. Well, actually, I didn't lose it because I didn't tell them, but eventually I told them and had to do a whole court process to fight and advocate for the fact that we shouldn't lose it. So I was able to keep it, but that took, years and energy and paralegals, and so there's just a lot of fighting uphill just to keep minimal amounts, just to survive, just to be a functioning member of society. That's not really a question, I guess. We can do better.
Thank you.
That's what I'm saying. Thank you.
Har?
Thanks for your presentation and thank you for your deputations. I was hoping you could speak a little bit more about the central intake. My understanding is that folks call intake and there's data collected. Is there also data collected in terms of who isn't able to speak to someone at central intake, and as well in terms of like drop-offs, calls being dropped off? And as well as can you speak a little bit to the relationship between the city and nonprofits who are also working on perhaps providing that kind of support for folks to be able to get to the central intake line?
Yeah, through the chair, we do collect information of callers in our that are calling into our central intake, and those who are not able to be matched to a shelter bed. So those calls do include an intake of the needs of the individuals who are calling in, regardless of whether or not they're matched to a shelter bed. So we do collect that information. We also have information on the number of calls that are dropped. So someone who is dropping the call for whatever reason. So we do have that data, yes. And I'm sorry, the second
Can you speak to the relationship with nonprofits in terms of getting folks to call the central intake line and referral programs and so on, just for us to have better information of how the system works?
Thank you. Through the chair. Yeah, so we have, as I mentioned, a mixed service delivery model. So we work with community agencies who deliver services, whether they be shelter services, streets to homes, street outreach services, drop-in services. Those service providers are aware of the central intake process and system, and so they can and will refer clients to central intake as needed. I will also note that if someone arrives at a shelter location, then that intake will happen at the shelter location as well. That does not necessarily require a referral to central intake. They will connect with central intake to ensure that that intake for that individual is in the right space.
Daniel?
I'm just curious to learn more about the wraparound services specifically from a healthcare angle. I know Inner City Health Associates has a number of clinics in some of the shelters. I'm wondering to what other extent is there integration with healthcare services? I'm wondering about like paramedicine and emergency departments, but also patients who require admission to hospital and then are unhoused and don't have anywhere to go. How does that communication happen to the shelter system?
Thanks for the question. Through the chair, yes, as you mentioned, our key health service partner is Inner City Health Associates. They provide primary care to individuals who are in our shelter system. We also offer harm reduction services as well, and overdose prevention. We work very closely through ICHA, Inner City Health Associates, in terms of ensuring people have access to the right health care, and that may include access to hospital emergency care if needed. Our staff in the shelter system are able to work and do work closely with emergency departments across the city to ensure that people who need care are accessing that care. That is often done in cooperation and in partnership with our key health partner, which is ICHA.
Are there any further questions from the committee for the staff at this time? And I'm checking online to see if there's any questions there. I don't see any. Bahar, did you have a follow-up? And Gord?
Sorry, you were explaining the process of us reading the letters as well?
Sorry?
You were explaining the process of us reading the letters that were sent as well? And I think we got cut off. I'm not sure.
Sorry. What I was saying is that a number of letters were received, and they are available as part of the HRAC. Gord, you were saying where we could find them.
Yeah, you can either you just go on the same place on the website where you got your agenda for this, and there will be a thing communications, or you can just go generally on the city's committee page for this committee and look at communications. Yeah.
Perhaps as a follow-up, we can send a link so that people can readily access that. Gord, did you have a question?
Yeah. Could you just tell the committee what the status of the CAMH report on shelter safety is? What's being done with it? What's next?
Through the chair, the CAMH report was endorsed by Economic and Community Development Committee. We are now developing a shelter safety action plan that we will be reporting back to ECDC, Economic Community Development Committee, in Q4 of this year on the development of that plan, which will include our plan to implement the 22 recommendations from the study, as well as other actions that we've already undertaken or begun to undertake. And we will be doing that work in collaboration with this committee here. We will be coming back to this committee with an engagement of sorts to determine how best to proceed with the implementation of those actions, and we'll be engaging with people with lived experience through our partnerships with our advisory bodies.
Just help me understand the relationship and timing. So you're going to the committee in December. I assume there will be actions, so it would be December council as well? Just if there are actions, yeah?
Likely the report will go to council, through the chair, likely the report will go to council following that meeting.
And your plan to come here would be when?
In the fall, so in September.
So in advance of council seeing it? Okay. And yeah, and just for the committee members, that's before the budget is approved in February.
Through the chair, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, I'd like to say thank you to Joseph and the team at TSSS for the presentation. I think you've given us lots to think about as we go into our own priority setting. So this is very helpful, and we look forward to, I think, seeing you back then in September with the action plan. With that, then, I would...
Hey.
Hello?
Hey.
Oh, B. We've got B. Sorry, B,
yeah.
Did you have a question?
Sorry. Yeah, because I use the phone. It's very hard for me to do any talking. I don't have a question, but I would like to echo what the group just said about the shelter system, the safety. I did attend the CAMH safety report, and it seems like the report said more the client did more harm to the staff than the staff did more harm to the client. I disagree with that. I'm going to tell you my lived experience. So many things happen here when I'm in the city-run shelter. At one point, I think last time we had our meeting is March 18. Not long after that, I almost had mental breakdown, and I'm still coping on it. I think I'm in a Scarborough Women's Shelter, city-run shelter in Scarborough. they have many rules, but those rules is mainly to protect the staff more than protect the clients. And there's so many things. I'm just going to highlight a few things. I find most of the staff, they are very unprofessional. For example, March 18, when we have our meeting, and after meeting, I went for house viewing, and then I didn't get back to the shelter until like probably late afternoon, evening time. And then when I enter my room, I noticed that my room was searched, my staff was searched. So I went to the staff before they left for good, home. And then I said, did you guys search my bag? They said, all three of them denied. No. I say, you guys must have searched my bag, because how can my bag shift position? Not only that, the things from my bag drop out from the bag. That means somebody had to touch it. Nobody come to the room except you guys who came to the room for room check. And usually, and because that day I have to go for the meeting, so I left very early, 7 something. So I wasn't in the shelter for the room check time. So they all deny, they all lie that they didn't search my bag. And I was mad. I say, why you guys always search people's bag? Not just me. So many clients complain about that. Why you guys search people's bag when we are not in the room? When you are in the room, nothing is searched. Why only do when we are not in the room? I said, only thief do something like that when nobody in the room, nobody around. So to me, it's like very unprofessional. And then second thing, this man staff knock at the door, and then they don't wait for people to answer. They right away they open the door, they come in, and I was in the washroom. My door was closed. I don't have to close my door because I'm alone in my room. But for safety, just in case, because I know they always come in like that. After they knock, they don't wait for you. So I always close my door. But I did not. The problem is I did not lock my door, because to me I don't think I should. I have to lock the door. So I didn't lock my door. The man staff came in my room. He saw the washroom door was closed. He didn't knock the door, and he opened the door. I was very surprised. So I complained I bring the issue to the supervisor. Supervisor tried to protect the staff. Not only that, shift leader also tried to protect the staff. That make the staff know whatever they do to us, nothing will harm to them. The client always is the one who suffer. We got abused all the time, but not the staff. And they know how to abuse us. That's something I really work hard and advocate hard to change. So many things happen in the shelter, but they have 7 staff. Agency run shelter, only 2 staff. You can find the staff easily in agency run shelter, but not in city run shelter. Right? In this shelter, they have their room that they cannot have microwave in the lobby or outside. You have to be in the room for safety reasons. So we always have to ask the staff to warm up our food. And at one time, I think not long after our March 18 meeting, I was so busy with my meeting and a house search, so I couldn't find any stuff to warm up my food. So I didn't have my food, and I had to go to the meeting, and so I haven't eaten for 2 days. And then my food was like, my fridge was full up of food. And when they come for room check, they question me, explain why your fridge is so full with food. I said, because I didn't eat for 2 days. And then I said, I'm going to clean up. Because weekend, I don't want that meeting. And I'm going to clean up. And I report to the shift leader. Shift leader give me a warning letter. Ridiculous. And then to a point, and then they come 3 times to check my room, to check the fridge. I said, this always they do. When they want to get something done, they want it to do right away. There's no objection. I said, give me few hours or few days, to work on it. No, right away, right now. So they come 3 times. Mentally, I was so exhausted, all this harassment. And finally, I broke down. And at first, I was wondering why I kept on sleeping. I have so many things to get done. I couldn't have energy to do anything. And then the staff also, most of the staff had no patience. One time, they give me a wrong breakfast. And that's something I cannot eat. So I went to the staff. I said, they give me a wrong breakfast. Can you check whether my breakfast still there? Because when it's after like 1 hour later, over to the lobby and whoever wants a second, they can take it, right? So I said, can you check any first day? And then he went and then he come out and said, no, I think he thought it's regular. He said no regular in the kitchen. I said no, it's a special because that's something I cannot eat that day, that breakfast. And then he had no patience. Although he's impatient, he yelled at me. You don't understand English? I was so shocked. All this time I'm talking with you. Every time communicate with you in English. Why you mad at me that I don't understand your English? And so I was so upset. And then one staff, say, why you so upset? So I talked to her. She said, go to complain to the shift leader. And then I talked to the shift leader. Shift leader talked to him. And then no, nothing. So the next day I go to shift leader. I say, what's up now? I said, I need an answer. He said, oh, the staff going to talk to you. I said, he didn't come to talk to me. So anyway, we got that thing settled. But it's always like, there's something like by force. They always want to do things right away. And then by force, they want you to do it. Even shift leader came to my room without notice. He knocked at my door and said, I need to check your fridge. I said, the staff already came 3 times. He said, I need to see with my own eyes. I said, the staff just came. Anyway.
Thank you.
He said, I need to see with my own eyes. And he was complaining that still I need to clear more. And anyway.
Thank you, B.
So my
Yes?
do something, but to them they don't. They want you to rule right away. Even when the chemist have the report, and I attend that meeting, and then the counselor email me calendar invite to see her. I answer her. I say I can do 3 o'clock, but not 2 p.m. because I didn't explain what I do at 2 p.m. So I went to her at 3 o'clock. She said, you are late for 2 p.m. I said, I'm not late. I send you an email in advance that I can attend 3 p.m. but not 2 p.m. She said, no, you didn't email me that. I said, check your email. You didn't pay attention to your email. So finally, she had nothing to say because I did send her. And then she said, what are you doing at 2 p.m.? I said, I have a meeting. And then she said, you don't prioritize your housing. Your meeting is more important than housing. I said, This is your assumption. I spend 40 to 50 hours per week working on my housing search. But you didn't even support me when I have challenges. I had around 10 houses that I want to rent, but no landlord want to rent it to me because they don't understand about court. They don't trust about court. Even I told them, they say, how are you going to pay? I say, I have subsidy from the city. They don't trust it. They don't know much about it. And then they say, this, huh?
I'm going to have to ask you to bring it to a bit of a close because we have to move along.
Yeah, I'm going to cut off. And then they say, oh, I lost my mind. And then, I say, they ask whether I have a job. I say, I don't have a full-time job, but I do work and do get some pay on 9 a.m. But they say you have no job. We can rent it to you.
Yeah.
I told the council, you didn't even help me. All this, how am I going to solve this problem? You know? And then I find out some other stuff told me this letter to give to the landlord about court. She didn't give me anything, right? Anyway, it's all they know how to do is like, give you a warning letter, and then they lie about, this one time, and then most of the stuff slip.
So I think we're going to have an opportunity to go deeper on shelters as we get into our work of the committee over the next period. I'm going to ask to just sort of wrap it up there because we need to get on with the rest of the agenda. But thank you, Bea. Everything, as always, is extremely important because you bring to life the experience of living in the system. So thank you for that. Lindsay, did you have one quick last thing?
I want to say one thing about the managers 3 to 6 months, not 3 to 6 months, we can stay in the shelter whenever, we couldn't find a housing, but this is not what the shelter are doing. Whatever the city is doing is not what shelter is doing. They have their own rule and own way of doing things. So I think the manager need to talk with the shelter supervisor or manager, whatever, to synchronize.
Right. So we're going to have to get into sort of broader things of accountability around that and transparency. So I think you're hitting on all the right notes. So we'll come back.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
No, that's great. Thank you. Lindsay, did you have a quick note?
Just really quickly. So currently I'm the tenant representative and living in Toronto Community Housing. So I'm the representative for the residents at particular.
Can you use your mic, please?
Oh, and I was wondering, so we're seeing, encampments type, we're seeing people come in that need support, and I'm wondering if there's wraparound supports for the people that you've housed through this initiative, and what those wraparound supports look like, because we have such a vulnerable population that's already on the verge of collapsing. Not only the people employed with Toronto Community Housing can't handle it, but the residents there are already so vulnerable that when we have an onslaught of people that need even more support, then it doesn't seem that there are wraparound supports for them. And they are coming directly from the encampments. And I'm just wondering, when you get these people into housing, is there direct wraparound supports for them within housing? Thank you.
Through the chair, when someone is housed, either from the shelter or from an encampment, they are provided with 1 year of housing follow-up supports. That 1 year often will extend just to ensure that there is stability as much as possible for the individual.
I wonder what that looks like and how often that is happening, because I have so much to say on it. It is really incredible to see the impact that it's having on already vulnerable communities. And that's something I think needs to be also looked at. Thank you.
Through the chair, can I just add something to the response around rapid housing? Sorry, Abby Bond, the Executive Director of the Housing Secretariat. So my colleague here correctly identified, so rapid rehousing has been a really important way for us to move people from the shelter system, from encampments, people living outside, into housing like TCHC. It's been a really important resource for us over the last couple of years, and it does come with wraparound services for those individuals. They do go through an assessment process and are selected appropriately for the buildings, and they also choose to go into those buildings. In addition to the Canada-Ontario Housing Benefit, it's probably been the most successful way that we've actually housed homeless people over the last number of years. We acknowledge that people often have, multiple health issues that need support. And so one of the things, in addition to the rapid rehousing that we're doing this year, is we have a new program that we're launching called Anchor Agency, an Anchor Agency program. And this is where we're currently going to the nonprofit community housing sector to identify organizations who specialize in delivering additional supports. So like the Lofts of this world, lots of organizations that we already work with. And we've identified, I think it's 3 or 4 key buildings in the TCHC portfolio. And we're going to be going through a process of matching additional support providers to those buildings so that we can enhance the kind of services and supports that are provided in those buildings and do an evaluation about that to see how successful that is and how it can support both the existing communities that live there, new residents moving in, and also the staff and the adjacent community.
Thank you, and thank you to the staff. If there are no further questions at this point, I would like to thank the staff. I'd like to thank all the individuals who came forward to speak to us on the item, and to the committee itself for the sharing around this very important issue. If there are no motions, I would move to receive the item for information at this time. All in favor? I'm seeing hands. Lindsay, can I see your hand? Gord, can I see your hand? Thank you. Online, can I see hands? Thank you. Okay, and so that is carried. Moving forward, we have 2 more items. We may need to go past 12:30. How far past 12:30 can we go without? We're going to go fast. We're not going to spend time on the next one because we've lost time. Mm-hmm. But if we just need an extra 10 or 15 minutes, can we just creep? Okay.
Yeah, even to 1 or 1:30, that's fine.
Okay. We won't go that far. People will get hungry. Okay, so we're going to move quickly through the last item. I'm pleased to welcome staff from the Housing Secretariat who have been working on a proposed priorities framework. So I'm going to actually be jointly presenting with them. Matt is here. Matt Hilder from the Housing Secretariat worked with me and Meredith on developing a proposed framework. As we get into this item, this had originally been intended to be a longer item, perhaps spending an hour and a half for us to sort of think through and debate. I think that I'm going to recommend that we approach this with information to be received, and then a proposal to perhaps look at a way of working on this between now and September through working groups. So because we're short on time, and I think actually smaller working groups will be a good way for us to dive into how we want to come at the priorities, and then we can come back in September for some decision making around that. So without much further ado, Matt, over to you, and then I will also co-present on the other half.
Thank you. Is this mic on? Yes? Okay,
Go ahead.
good. Thank you. So I'm Matt Hilder, manager of the program policy team with the Housing Secretariat. This is a very brief presentation, more of an introduction to what Elizabeth will be speaking on in more detail, but we wanted to walk the committee through some of the work that we've been doing over the past number of months with some of the information that actually the committee members provided us, as well as in consultation with the chair, to develop this framework for priority setting, as we're now calling it. So I'll be very quick, and then mostly I'll pass this over to Elizabeth. But really the rationale for this is recognizing that this committee has a lot of potential areas of interest, impact, and influence over the remainder of this council term. And there needs to be some sort of framework or way in which we can prioritize and focus this committee's attention so that it can meet its mandate over that remaining time period. We've included on this slide some, you've seen the summary of the council approved mandate before. That's quite a broad mandate. And so also this framework is intended to help focus the committee's attention to make sure we're meeting all of the objectives that City Council has set for this committee. So as I mentioned, the framework which Elizabeth will actually walk through, or the chair will actually walk through rather, it provides a rationale for the priorities of this committee, the intended outcomes of its action, foundational approaches that would be taken, and illustrates some examples of city programs or initiatives where there is some intersect or overlap between the committee's interest and the work underway already at the city. This would also be used as a guide for planning the meeting agendas on a quarterly basis, or if the committee opted to have more meetings. It will also be a public commitment regarding the priority areas of the committee, which is, I think, important, particularly given the public attention even today around the work of this committee and its mandate. And it will also demonstrate to council how the committee is going to meet the mandate that it was assigned. So in terms of the process to develop this, staff with the chair looked at a number of different things, the priorities that members had indicated. So you'll recall in applying to be a member of this committee, we requested members to provide some information about what their main priorities are around housing, rights, and homelessness issues in the city. So we took some of that and did an analysis of that. A housing rights lens is, of course, very important. So looking at the principles of a human rights to housing approach and the elements of the right to adequate housing. Looking at the mandate, of course, from council, which is important to this. And then lastly, the priorities of the Housing TO Action Plan. So all of these things kind of come together into putting the framework for priority setting together. We also had the benefit of looking at some other council advisory bodies similar to this one. So the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Advisory Body, 2S LGBTQ advisory bodies, and others to see how they had approached this challenging exercise of planning for a work plan over a 3 or 4 year period. I wanted to just spend one more moment on the members' priorities. We have, of course, more information if the committee would wish to see more information about this in the future, sort of a reflection of your interest back to you. But on the slide here is just a summary of the main buckets or categories that members expressed interest in when they were applying to be on this committee. I won't read through all of them, but sort of the top ones that were indicated by many people who applied to be on the committee and were selected is protections for renters is certainly top of mind. Access to housing systems, so how individuals find access to housing out of the shelter system, out of encampments. Support services and supports that are available to help people maintain the housing stability. As well as a human rights lens, particularly that the city is taking a human rights lens in its approach to housing and housing-related work. So those are just some of the main member priorities that we looked at, but we really considered all of them in coming up with this framework. And lastly, I think I end on this slide is just to again iterate how the framework will be used as a way of planning for the agendas and also make sure that this committee is continuing to hit on the things that are of most importance over the course of the council term and as kind of a check-in to make sure the committee is continuing to provide advice in the various areas that council has selected as its mandate. I think in terms of the next steps, I'll just close there and then pass it over to the chair. This is a draft, and as the chair has just said, there will be sort of a process perhaps beyond this for more input from committee members into this. And so perhaps we'd be looking to bring this back in a final form to the next meeting of the committee in September. And that's it. I can get them.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. Sure. So thank you, Matt. So this was a hard thing to pull together, made more difficult by the fact that it should have been done by all of us as a group. And if we're going to be true to a human rights-based approach with also working with rights holders and communities of rights holders to really formulate what the priorities should be. But we're also working against the constraint of urgency and getting moving on getting the work done. So what we have pulled together, I would argue, is a draft that we need to now look at. It may be wrong, and we have to be ready to say, this doesn't work, it needs to look different. And so that's, I begin with that caveat. This may not work, it may not be the right thing. Do we have the slides coming up?
I have it here if the
If you could just move the slides for me, that'd be great.
Yeah, I think it just needs to be up on the.
So
Are you seeing the slide?
I'm not seeing anything.
Okay. No.
So I'll just start, there we go. So the background to this, we've already talked a little bit about, we're all familiar. We have this Toronto Housing Charter that is committed to a rights-based approach. I think we are building a common understanding of what the right to adequate housing entails, that it's about every person has the right without discrimination, that it has to be affordable, accessible, secure, and safe. That progressive realization means that we're moving forward always, which means that we are monitoring, we are measuring, we are transparent, and we're able to hold to account the duty bearers, which is the city, to ensure that we are moving forward. And so our committee has an important role to play in that. I think that we have an important role to play hand in hand with the Ombuds Office in terms of working together to make sure that we are moving in that direction. So the priority framework is really about setting a direction for our work. We started off trying to think, what does a work plan look like? And to be honest, it's almost impossible to draft a work plan when we haven't actually gotten our heads around the scope of everything that we have to work with. There's also a reality that we need to be responsive to emerging issues, to issues that the city is putting forward. We have been positioned as providing housing rights advice to the city, so we need to be able to have that flexibility in doing that going forward. As we looked at the priorities that each of you had identified, as we looked at what the city is doing, we kind of created 4 key components. The first one is for people who are unhoused and what interactions they have. So the most vulnerable, and in a human rights-based approach, that actually has greatest priority, those who are most vulnerable. Second in that is where people are now getting access to housing and what's required in the getting access part and what else comes around that. So we've heard about some of that today. Issues around accessibility, issues around perhaps wraparound supports or services, be they mental health, physical health, other pieces that go into making housing work for people. The third component, and actually let's move on to the chart because it's just a better visual. So supporting people who are unhoused is the first component, access to housing, maintaining housing. So now you have housing, how do you hold on to it? Because we know that many people are precariously housed, which means that they can lose their housing through eviction or other things that are happening in their life. And then on the fourth component, this is more of a systems view. Are we ensuring that we are increasing the right supply of housing? We hear a lot about a housing crisis and that there's lots of money coming to build. Are we getting the right supply, and are we sure that we're measuring that the right way? We began by saying, what is the human rights consideration here? How do we frame this as a human rights issue? And so people who are unhoused face particular challenges meeting basic needs. We've heard about that today. Very compelling personal stories and experiences of those challenges. It could include shelter, clean water, sanitation, food, heating, accessibility supports, so on and so forth. That's the human rights considerations. Those are all fundamental human rights. Access to housing, when people are facing barriers accessing housing that is affordable, safe, and helps meet their other needs. Maintaining, so these are all put out in human rights considerations. People who are housed can experience various challenges, maintaining that housing, keeping it adequate, and so forth. And then I've already talked about supply. Working with Matt and Meredith, I think we did a good run. It's not complete, it's not exhaustive, but some examples of where city programs, policies, actions, decisions impact people in these areas. And so I'm not going to read through all of them because it's a long, long list of city programs. And there's probably more. This is, again, it's just a draft and beginning to get a sense of what's in scope. The next cut across in the matrix, if we go down to the next screen, is what are the housing outcomes, the housing rights outcomes that we want to see? So it's not about monitoring whether or not a policy got put in place. It's not monitoring the bureaucracy per se. It's ensuring that the human rights outcomes are what we want them to look like. And so this is a brainstorming. This is not definitive. This is a first attempt at saying, what would these human rights outcomes look like? And so for people who are unhoused, do we actually see the number of people who are unhoused going down? Are we able to track that? Do we have good data? Is it accessible? Is it transparent? And can we show that the numbers are decreasing? Do we have a response that is human rights informed? So we know that the team under Joseph's team is working on an interdepartmental protocol on approaching encampments. What difference is that making? Is it implemented, and how do we hear about it? Those are human rights outcomes. Targets and timelines for ensuring that basic necessities for finding solutions. Do we have the right service standards? Do we have the right shelter access and safety? We heard a lot about shelter experience today. Do we have the right standards? Do we have the right processes for accountability? Do we have the right data to tell us where we're at and how we're doing? What do we need to know, and how do we make sure that people who are experiencing shelters are having different housing rights outcomes? That's the goal that we would want to see. And so we've done this for each of the columns on access to housing. Do we have increased and equitable access, always ensuring that it's equitable, that there's not discrimination? We've heard very powerful examples today of discrimination based on ability or disability, on physical health needs, and is that being met? And are there processes in place to ensure that that's being met? Is there better access to supportive housing programs with clear definitions and goals, culturally responsive programming? Is this meeting the fullness of people's needs and meeting them where they are at? Then there's a whole set of housing rights outcomes related to maintaining housing. Do tenants have access to emergency resources to prevent eviction? We have good programs at the city. What are the outcomes? Is it enough? Do we need to do more? Is it hitting the right target? And so then that goes down for the maintaining housing. And then for increasing the right supply, the question is, are we doing enough as a city? And maybe this goes into some of the planning and thinking about how do we get housing built? Are we ensuring that we're preserving deeply affordable housing? Great example is the MURA program, Multi-Unit Residential Acquisition Program, a great program to preserve what is affordable and deeply affordable. Is it enough? Do we need more? And is it producing the right supply at that level so that we have places for people to move into, that we are able to connect people to housing where they can lock their door? Listening to Bea talk about her lack of security because she couldn't lock the door, and her experience, really, really important. So are we moving in that direction? So these are outcomes that we want to see under each of these areas. This is a lot of work. So to be clear, this committee is not going to accomplish all of this in 1 year or 2 years, right, Gord? The lifetime. But what it does is it helps us, and what I thought was really important is that we begin with housing rights outcomes. So whatever we land on as the priority of what we're going to work on, that it should be driven by human rights, what the human rights of the individuals are, and what are the outcomes we're looking for. So this is all for example. This is not our work plan. This is just how we need to be thinking about it. If we drop down to the next one, these are some of the questions and considerations we should come to this work with, which is whose challenges are being represented and not represented? Are we missing people? Which communities are most impacted? Are some communities experiencing this more than others? And how do we come at that, and how do we get up into the issues of systemic discrimination? How are we as a community going to connect with communities that are impacted? And this is I've been really banging my head against the wall on this one, because we only have so far 4 meetings a year. And one of the things in our terms of reference is to connect with communities. We had a wonderful benefit of hearing from people who are impacted directly this morning, and I'm grateful for their coming forward and telling their stories. But we need to be able to do this in a broader way. And I have some thoughts about that I'll talk about in a minute. what are the interjurisdictional issues? We've also been asked to think about this, not only what does the city do, but are there other orders of government that need to come to the table? And we heard about that for VAW, violence against women and their shelters, because that's often a provincial domain. ODSP is a provincial domain. So how do we begin to connect the dots vertically through other orders of government? And so then there's also our task, and it's right in our terms of reference, on monitoring outcomes. And there is going to be a half-year evaluation of how is Toronto doing on its 10-year plan. It's identified that we're going to be involved in that, so that's also part of our priority, to ensure that we are weighing in with that human rights outcomes lens into that evaluation process. It's not we don't do the evaluation, but we have a role to play, and it's figuring out what that role is and what are the questions, concerns, and considerations that we bring to that. So those are the components of a priority setting framework. It's not a work plan. It's just beginning to put a frame around what are the things that we may want to think about. And then that needs to be balanced with, as I said, what's coming from the city for us to look at. So we know that Toronto Shelter and Support Services wants to come back with the shelter safety action plan. So that's going to already be on our agenda in September. There will be other things that come to us. We are going to want to see and hear from the Ombuds when their next report comes out. We are going to want to hear and see other pieces as well, particularly as it impacts those who are most vulnerable. And so my proposal is this. In terms of connecting with other committees, or communities rather, and our ability to hear from communities, I've begun to reach out to other standing committees at the city, community advisory boards. So I'm meeting with someone from the Toronto Indigenous Community Advisory Board this afternoon. I think that we should be connecting to the community confronting anti-Black racism. There is a standing committee on disability and accessibility issues, 2S LGBTQ+. We have these existing structures in the city, and so there could be a way that we simply have a way of connecting with them to hear from them, to say, this is a priority for us. We want to talk to you about housing from this point of view, so that we're able to maximize that and bring those points of view into our work without having to, try to find, 100 hours a day to make all the things done, get everything done that we're supposed to. So my proposal is this: for us to further this definition of what we're going to do and begin to build a process for setting our agenda for each meeting, my suggestion is that we begin to make connections with other community advisory boards at the city, and two, that over the course of the summer, between now and September, we convene working groups that are less formal than this, that are smaller, where we are able to flesh out, take a look at this agenda, look at this sort of priority framework, and begin to build out what we think should be the agendas, or what the process for setting our agenda should look like. Because I don't want the responsibility of setting the agenda for each meeting. That wouldn't be right. Certainly wouldn't be a human rights-based approach. And so I want us to come together to figure out what that process needs to look like, how we are all engaged in that, and are there others of you that want to participate in connecting with other community advisory groups at the city? Again, can't all be me. I want to distribute how we're engaging with this work. I will stop there. Was there more on my slides, Matt, or did I get to the end of it? I mentioned these standing committees. So there's city committees, but then there's also community, which didn't get listed here. But all of those committees may refer stuff to us, so that's also part of the agenda setting. So questions are, does this framework resonate? Is it a good starting place? Is it beginning to capture what we need to think about and do? How do we go about building a process for setting the agenda? I think we could spend 2.5 years just receiving input from people, but we may not get anything done that way. So we need to be very deliberate about setting priorities and identifying specific agenda items so that we can move motions that ask the committees of the city and city council itself to consider our advice on housing as a human right. I'll stop there. Now we need to make a lunch break decision. My proposal is that we go for another 15 minutes and wrap up and call it a day. Can we make it to 1:45? What is it? Oh, I have a motion. You're so good. Okay. That the Housing Rights Advisory Committee extend the meeting to complete the agenda, and I promise I will get you out of here by 1:45.
Normally committees break at 12:30.
You're good with that? Okay, it's a motion. All in favor, seeing hands go up? Yeah, come on, 15 minutes. Okay, and we've got online agreement and carried. Thank you. Okay, so.
Welcome to rules-based decision making. You have to vote on whether or not to have lunch.
We will have lunch. It's just going to be 15 minutes delayed. Okay, so with that, I'm going to stop talking. I've talked too much. Does this sound like a way forward? Or are there other comments, first of all, on what you've heard? Did we completely miss the boat? That's not a fair question. Anybody want to comment? Lindsay.
So thank you for that. That was amazing. My trauma brain completely blanked out right now. But I just thought that was really on point.
Right. Thank you.
And I agree, I think the working groups are going to be extremely important. I can also reach out to the Toronto Community Housing Advisory Council that was just formed. I know a lot of people there, so
that would be great.
Yep.
That's exactly the kind of thing I'm hoping for, that people identify which community groups or organizations that they can connect to and be almost a liaison for our committee. Anyone else? Bahar.
I echo what Lindsay just mentioned. Also, it's a really helpful first draft for us to kind of think about the many, many issues that we really need to consider on how to set the priorities. And I just want to say that I think it would be really helpful to kind of work through these things in whatever way, if it's working groups or whatnot during the summertime, so that we can really kind of hone on specific issues and speak to other committees and groups.
Right. Daniel? Did I see your hand go up?
Yeah, I was just going to offer an affirmation that I think this makes a lot of sense. We'll work on it over the summer. It'll be very challenging to set the priorities once we establish this, but it's a challenging issue as well. To the extent that we need someone to connect with the Board of Health, I'm happy to be that person.
Thank you. Nicole.
Doing what a lot of folks are saying, yeah, this is a great starting point, and breaking it kind of into those 4 pillars, I think, is going to frame the work of our working groups really well. I forgot the list of organizations and committees that we want to reach out to, but I have no problem reaching out to some folks to be a liaison and kind of get this work started.
Terrific. Thank you, Nicole. Anyone else want to comment or weigh in at this point? Yes, Gord.
Just a couple thoughts. I think there's an emerging sense that the 4 columns you had are a good theoretical model for organizing the work. And given my role as Chair of Planning and Housing, that 4th column, the housing piece, I'd be happy to support any work there.
Great.
One other thought I had is in developing the agendas and maybe in assigning some tasks, there are some key external dates coming in on us. So one is the shelter safety report. We need to have some thoughts together by September. Another is the annual review of the city's housing action plan. So maybe, I'm going to volunteer. Maybe Abby can help us be aware of what some of those key dates that we have external deadlines imposed on us about are. Yeah.
I think that would be helpful because that's part of our agenda setting. Bahar.
That's a great idea. And in terms of the key dates, are there other orders of government key dates that we can also kind of...
Like they ever tell us.
But things that we know, perhaps, even the members that have some insights into what may be coming, that would be helpful as well.
One of the things that we can think about doing is connecting with the Office of the Federal Housing Advocate, because she has brought forward recommendations or a call for a national plan on encampments at the city level. And I believe that they are supposed to be reporting on that by August. So when there are things like that happening, and I think I don't know that we can monitor the fullness of it, but where they are very germane to what we're talking about, I think absolutely we should pull that in. Yep. Oh, sorry, Anne-Marie.
Hi, everyone. Well, I guess what I wanted to interject with, or just to make a mention of, I think we need to also do a bit of deep dive into the CAMH report as well, as it relates to the 4 key components that you've just shared. Hopefully, doing that could potentially bring out some vital key information that could potentially just kind of like just work well with the components that you shared. Who knows what we might find that could complement the work moving forward. I thought I'd throw that out.
Great, thank you. Okay, so people are hitting some highlights where we need to be attentive in the first instance. That's very helpful. In terms of keeping the work moving, we have a meeting on September 23rd, which gives us a few months to get some stuff done in the meantime. I have suggested working groups. I have a motion here, and it reads like this. Can we put it up? The motion is that the Housing Rights Advisory Committee, 1, direct that the chair work with members to establish working groups. 2, direct the working groups to meet in the summer of 2024 in order to report to the September 23rd Housing Rights Advisory Committee meeting with terms of reference and any urgent work. 3, request the Executive Director, Housing Secretariat to provide support to the working groups. That's a way forward. If you notice, I'm the first one that's compelled to do something. If that sounds like a reasonable way forward, that's the motion. All in favor? Or do I have to ask for questions first? Yeah, does anybody want to talk about that? Are there questions? Daniel.
I was just curious, how do you envision the working groups being organized according to the draft framework?
So, to be completely honest, I'm not sure in this moment. Okay. I think that there's probably one around process and agenda setting. So how do we envision building process? Given the fact that we will probably be looking at the report, the shelter safety report in September, there may be interest in people, a small working group that actually dives into that to pull out questions that we might have or concerns or what have you, so that we're ready in September. I don't want us to just receive information without a readiness to respond to and make recommendations. So that's 2 off the top. And what I would suggest is that we've received a lot of information this morning. I won't jump on anything. What I will do is probably send out an email to get suggestions on how people want to organize. And then we can begin to do some of that informally. And I don't think more than 3 working groups at this point, just so that we are able to get our arms around what's coming and come in September. We may decide in September that we need 6 working groups. For now, let's just be a little bit generic and say working groups to keep getting us to September at this point. I'm looking to the screen, nodding. Yes, Joy.
Is your concept that the working groups would be made comprised exclusively of the people in this group? Are you thinking of them as you're a core group, but with others involved and have expertise in the area?
So I think that's a great question. I don't know if everybody heard it. Are the working groups exclusively committee members, or can they include other people as well? I'm going to suggest that for the first run, we start with committee members. And I would suggest that each working group consider, would they benefit from additional participation or other ways of connecting. But I think to begin, we're still getting our legs going on this. Let's figure out what we are first. I'm seeing nodding from Anne Marie. I'm seeing Nicole nodding. We're good. Any other questions? Then the motion is on the table. All in favor? And everyone has their hand raised, so none opposed, motion carried. Thank you. Now I have other business. The other thing that was added at the beginning of the meeting to the agenda was, where's my script for this? Sorry, bear with me for 1 second. Here we go. You have the motion. There we go. Thank you. So I had, you received a copy of a letter that I sent to the committee. The background on this is that we have a number of people on this committee who are not otherwise compensated for their time working on this committee. I am very conscious that people are giving of their own time and are bringing to the table not only their human rights expertise, their housing subject matter expertise, but very importantly, their lived and living experience expertise, which is essential for the work of this committee. And I don't feel that we can be asking them to do that work in working groups without being compensated. The terms of reference for this committee were that public members of the committee would only be compensated for committee meetings, not for subcommittees, not for working groups, and not for events. I am proposing that we ask council to review that, to review those terms of reference, to consider compensating committee members, public members of the committee who are not otherwise compensated by their employer, to be compensated for participation at working group meetings. So that is that okay? Did I get it right? So there is a motion on the table, and the motion, the recommendation is that the Housing Rights Advisory Committee recommends that, notwithstanding Part 277 of City Council decision in item 2021.EX 221.2, City Council, City Council amend Section 7 of the Terms of Reference for the Housing Rights Advisory Committee so that it now reads as follows. In Section 7, Advisory Committee public members will be eligible to receive an honorarium of $125 per meeting or working group attended in recognition of the contributions they are providing to Toronto. The Advisory Committee's honoraria payments are subject to the following. A, honoraria are not intended for public members who serve on the Advisory Committee as representatives of organizations or businesses where they are employed. B, public members who serve as chair or vice chair of the Advisory Committee are not eligible for any additional honoraria. And C, honoraria are not paid for attendance at subcommittee meetings or events. It's got more structure, and the clerks attend and keep minutes. Is that a fair? I got it right. I'm learning. So that is the recommendation that I am moving. Are there any questions? Bahar.
Do we know which city council meeting this will be going to?
Thinking about that. Two ways we can go. We can forward this to exec. Is it in time for the exec agenda closing for this cycle?
Is that tomorrow? Tomorrow.
Otherwise, I could bring it as a member's motion. No, so what I'll do, Elizabeth, I will see if I can find a council to second the motion that would go on to this council meeting agenda, because you want to have the meeting start
Sooner rather than later would be great.
I'll figure out a way.
Thank you very much.
The next executive meeting will be June 18th.
It's too late. So what I will do is maybe I'll get Councilman Honorarium to second the member motion. The agenda goes
Okay, so if you didn't hear all of that, what we're going to do is pass this recommendation and pass it to the Housing Committee Chair, Housing and Planning Committee Chair, who will take it forward to City Council through a private something. So if there are no further questions, that is the motion. Can I see all in favor? Anne Marie, I'm looking to you. Nicole, I'm looking to you. We're good. Thank you very much. Moved, carried. Okay, I have other things that I'm turning to Jennifer, who is my right hand here. I gave an overview, we adopted it. Okay, we also, at the beginning of the meeting, failed to confirm the minutes of the Housing Rights Advisory Committee. May I have a motion to confirm the minutes of the Housing Rights Advisory Committee meeting held on March 18th, 2024? Moved by Lindsay. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. And the Housing Rights Advisory Committee excuses the absence of Harmy Mendoza from the May 13th meeting of the committee. Is that a motion? Can someone move it, please? Bahar, thank you. And all in favor? So moved. Thank you. Do I need a motion to close?
That's it.
That's it? Look, I promised 1:45.
Look at you, eh? I want you to chair everything. Can you just
Thank you, everybody.
send a note when you draft them?
Poof.